Chapter 628. Okay, since you insist. Yi Xiaowu was silent. The tavern door opened, and people rushed in. Gu Fei glanced at them and recognized them as the veterans who had ambushed them in the morning. Gu Fei smiled and took a deep breath to calm his excitement. He slowly took out the Dark Knight lightsaber from his pocket. The players in the tavern had already looked over in surprise when Gu Fei flipped the table. Now that so many people had suddenly rushed in, they naturally knew what was going to happen. In a closed space like the tavern, watching a show wasn't a good entertainment activity. The spells of the magicians, the arrows of the archers, and even the warrior's whirlwind slash had a high chance of accidentally injuring others. Therefore, most of the players immediately left when they realized that something was wrong. A few people who would die if they didn't join in the fun hid in the corner, and tried to give these people as much space as possible. Negotiation failed. Negotiation failed. Prepare to attack. Prepare to attack. This group of veterans had also established a mercenary group. At this time, they were using the mercenary channel as a radio communication. Water-breaking arrow sent a message. When the people outside received the message, they immediately broke through the door. Some carried bows, some held swords, and some held staffs. After entering, they surrounded Gu Fei in a fan shape. They formed a fan-shaped encirclement to protect the players who were hiding in the corner. At the same time, they left a safe and smooth path for the players who wanted to escape. The three of them organized the evacuation of the players. These guys were treating this as a terrorist incident and were evacuating the masses. Gu Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Is there any use in taking hostages? The crowd ignored him. Gu Fei suddenly attacked and stabbed at Yi Xiaowu, who was closest to him. Yi Xiaowu's skills weren't enough to dodge Gu Fei's sword. However, water-breaking arrow was always on guard. As soon as he saw Gu Fei raise his hand, he immediately lifted Yi Xiaowu and the two of them fell to the ground. If this was a normal day, such a crude dodging method would be waiting for Gu Fei to catch up and trample him to death. But the situation was different now. The veterans had basically completed the encirclement. As soon as they saw Gu Fei attack, someone immediately shouted, "Open fire!" Regardless of their class, these guys always had a bow or crossbow with them. At this moment, they immediately raised their bows and released their arrows. Gu Fei was already on guard. When he saw those guys raise their hands, he flew over a table and used the table as a shield. Then he heard continuous dang 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 sounds, and the wooden table was shot into a hedgehog. Gu Fei stole a glance outside. The tavern had two entrances that had been professionally sealed. As for the back door, this was just a system shop in the game. Everything that was sold was automatically generated. Of course, there wouldn't be anything like a delivery channel, so there was no back door. These two entrances were the exits, and there was no third option. The veterans continued to maintain their firepower to suppress Gu Fei while transferring a few fellows who were good at close combat to the table where Gu Fei was hiding. When they got close, the two warriors made a hand signal, and the firepower stopped. The two of them drew their swords and bowed. They looked at each other and nodded. Suddenly, they charged towards the wooden table together. Of course, the wooden table couldn't withstand the charge of the two warriors, and was sent flying. The two of them were also stunned. They clearly saw Gu Fei hiding behind the table, but there was no trace of Gu Fei. Before they could react, they suddenly felt a wave of heat beside them. Behind them, their companions shouted, "To the left!" The two of them hurriedly turned to the left. Gu Fei had already flashed over with his dual flames, and a 720-degree double kill. Although the veterans were more skilled than the average player, seeing how they were being bullied by Jian Nan and unscathed in battle, they knew that their equipment was very ordinary. Most warriors would put some points into constitution, but they were more willing to put them into agility. In comparison, their HP was slightly lower than that of an average level 40 warrior. When faced with Gu Fei's surging ultimate skill, they died cleanly. After taking care of the two, Gu Fei didn't give the others a chance to attack him. He immediately darted to the pile of tables at the side. The legs of the tables were everywhere. If one didn't pay attention, they wouldn't notice that there was a person hiding among them. However, this time, Gu Fei did it in front of everyone. Naturally, everyone saw his position clearly. Before they could open fire, Gu Fei pushed and kicked over a few tables in an instant. He was crouched behind the tables, and no one could see his exact location. It's teleportation. Yi Xiaowu finally realized. After Gu Fei flipped over the tables, everyone thought that he was hiding behind the tables. Who knew that he would use teleportation to flash behind a nearby table? Everyone's attention was on the table at that time, and no one noticed. When the two warriors leaned over to flip over the table, they were instantly killed by Gu Fei, who was crouching at the side. Sigh. Experience. Yi Xiaowu sighed. This was another misunderstanding caused by his lack of experience. Based on common sense, Gu Fei was definitely behind the table. However, in the game, something as surreal as teleportation happened. Once again, the veterans were framed by the game's setting. The two comrades were sacrificed in a rather unjust manner. Even Yi Xiaowu didn't figure out this situation when Gu Fei flashed behind the table. Experience was the accumulation of experience. Naturally, there would always be places that one didn't think of when they judged a scene they had never experienced. A person's imagination was limitless. For example, Yi Xiaowu didn't expect Gu Fei to use teleportation to fly into the air to slash someone in the morning. During the day, apple cider vinegar really did fulfill Yi Xiaowu's request and told the veterans a lot about his PK experience in the game. However, the experience he talked about was basically the style of fighting between ordinary players. Compared to fighting with Gu Fei, there was a huge difference in Qianli. Rather than fighting with Gu Fei, the veterans might as well rely on their actual combat experience. As for being fooled by teleportation, they could only learn from their mistakes and slowly grow in actual combat. Drop the bomb. Water-breaking arrow turned and shouted at Old Lei and Dalei. The veterans' ideas were so deeply rooted that it was difficult for them to completely abandon their understanding to adapt to the game. Instead, it was better to rely on some of the concepts in the game that they were familiar with. For example, when an arrow was shot, it was called firing. When a mage bombed the map, it was called dropping the bomb. Old Lei and Dalei stepped forward and threw their staffs. Two fire wheels fell from the sky and exploded toward the place where Gu Fei was hiding. Use a landmine. Water-breaking arrow suggested again. They called the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree a landmine. Yi Xiaowu felt that the lurker's trap was more like a landmine, but the veterans unanimously thought that the trap was a serious trap and was completely different from a landmine. The 1,000 layers flames of the flaming tree could barely be called a landmine. Hearing this, the two immediately cast the 1,000 layers flames together. The tables and chairs in the area that looked like a garbage dump turned into billowing waves of fire. Water-breaking arrow said unhappily, "Can't you two use a bomb and a landmine together?" The two nodded and said, "Wait, ammunition is being replenished." This meant that their skills were on cooldown. "Should we go closer?" The others asked. The veterans with rich combat experience had experienced real combat again and again in the game. When they found that their knowledge couldn't be used correctly in the game, they gradually began to hesitate. At this time, seeing that the enemy was lying in ambush, even though they were a large group, they couldn't decide whether to go closer or not. Everyone had seen Gu Fei's attack just now. One roll could roll up two groups of people. Now that everyone was in a group, they couldn't make up their minds whether to go closer or not. Yi Xiaowu thought back to Gu Fei's strike just now and felt astonished. At first, he thought that Gu Fei used double flame flash twice in a row, but after thinking about it, he found that the roll of flames didn't show any signs of interruption. One double flame flash spun around twice and didn't disappear? How was that possible? Yi Xiaowu didn't understand the technical content of Gu Fei's spin. Naturally, he couldn't understand it even if he cracked his head. Expand the encirclement, flank him from both sides. The veterans had already discussed a new battle plan. The encirclement didn't shrink but instead expanded. After expanding the radius, two groups of people had already flanked Gu Fei's hiding place. However, when they looked over, they immediately collapsed. He's gone again. While they were moving, Gu Fei's teleportation cooldown was over, and he once again flashed to who knows where. The distance of teleportation is about 5 meters. Yi Xiaowu hurriedly told everyone. Everyone's expression turned cold. They immediately expanded the radius of the area by 5 meters, and searched with their eyes. In the end, they still couldn't find any traces of Gu Fei. He teleported on foot. Water-breaking arrow sighed, but in the end he's still in this tavern. Unfortunately, the tavern was extraordinarily large. There were tables everywhere, and all of them were possible hiding spots. The veterans looked around with bright eyes, and the legs of tables and benches were everywhere. In just a short while, their eyes were dazzled. These people weren't young. In some aspects, they really couldn't be compared with young people. The tables and chairs are placed too densely. It doesn't meet the fire safety requirements at all. A veteran complained. I heard that you went to the local area to do firefighting after you retired? Someone next to him asked. Yes. How was it? Did you make any contributions? I've done it once, third class. The man chuckled. Good. You didn't embarrass us. Another person patted his shoulder and said. They were chatting, but there was still no trace of Gu Fei. Remove the obstacles. Water-breaking arrow said and asked Yi Xiaowu next to him. Can I? In the systems shop, there were tables and chairs arranged by the system. Water-breaking arrow didn't know if the system would have any opinions if he casually fiddled with it. But seeing that Gu Fei had already flipped over so many tables, the system didn't seem to have any reaction. If it's damaged, the system will ask for compensation. Yi Xiaowu said. Do you have enough money? Water-breaking arrow asked. Yi Xiaowu also felt guilty. This tavern was huge. He knew how much the system would ask for money. If it really asked for compensation, did he have enough money to pay? Whatever. Let's mess around first. Yi Xiaowu said. What would happen if he didn't have enough money? Ordinary people might not know, but Yi Xiaowu knew the rules. In fact, nothing would happen. The system wanted money, but you didn't give it? Then the system would directly take the money from your pocket. If it wasn't enough, it would take the money until it was enough. What could you do to the system? Water-breaking arrow nodded to the crowd. These guys continued to search for Gu Fei's location while moving the tables and chairs from the searched areas to the side. With more and more empty areas, it wouldn't be easy for Gu Fei to continue playing hide-and-seek. Who are these guys? The players gathered in the corner whispered and discussed with each other. I've never seen them before. I don't know any of them. There were also people in the audience who claimed to be famous in the city, but he didn't know any of the players in front of him. Just now when I asked the mages to throw spells, I think I heard them shout something about throwing bombs. Someone said, Haha, that's interesting. Who is the person they're chasing? One double flame flash killed 2 warriors. Who do you think it is? Qianli drunk? Who else could it be besides him? Ah, that's my idol. Where is he hiding now? Did you guys see him? No. After teleporting just now, I don't know where he flashed to. These players discuss while looking for Gu Fei's figure in the pile of tables and chairs. The veterans continued to search carefully, moving the tables and chairs. The entire tavern was gradually cleared out by them. Some of the players who entered the tavern were shocked. They didn't know what was going on. Not having a place to drink wasn't a big deal. At the very least, it couldn't be compared to not having a place to level up. So no one felt anything. Instead, they curiously stayed behind to see what these people were doing. As a result, more and more players stood at the edge of the tavern. The veterans' investigation was finally coming to an end. In such a small area, there was no need to move anything. It was obvious that there was no one there. Everyone was in a trance. During the investigation, they were always on guard against Gu Fei's sudden attack, so it was impossible for Gu Fei to move anywhere during the investigation. And considering that Gu Fei could teleport 5 or 6 meters at a time, they had cleared out a 5-meter-wide empty space at the beginning of the investigation. Then Gu Fei would teleport to this empty space and be completely exposed, or continue to teleport to an unsearched area. Gu Fei hadn't been exposed. At this time, all the areas had been searched, but there was no sign of him. Where did he go? Did we blow him up just now? Old Thunder and Big Thunder said. Did anyone see the white light? Breaking Arrow asked the others. He didn't see it. No. Everyone shook their heads. At that time, there was a fire. If the white light appeared, it would have been covered, someone said. It's just 4 spells. Even if he was hit by all of them, he shouldn't have died, right? Breaking Arrow asked Yi Xiaowu. When it came to data calculations, Yi Xiaowu was much more experienced than them. He won't die, Yi Xiaowu asserted. Yi Xiaowu asserted. He was well aware of Old Thunder's magic damage, and he had been paying attention to Gu Fei for a long time. He was also well aware of Gu Fei's equipment and stats. Old Thunder's 4 spells were definitely not enough to kill Gu Fei. Actually, do you two have PK points? Yi Xiaowu asked a simpler question. The two immediately understood and shook their heads. No. He didn't die. Did he use the Wind Chaser emblem? Breaking Arrow said. Apple Vinegar is over there. I didn't see him. Yi Xiaowu was prepared for this. What the hell? Breaking Arrow was surprised. At this time, Sniper God came over and whispered something to the two. The two froze. The other veterans searched the tavern and couldn't find Gu Fei. Just as they were feeling helpless, Breaking Arrow suddenly sent a message in the channel. Everyone be careful. The target is probably in the crowd. Everyone froze. They didn't disturb the normal players. Everyone was free to come and go in the tavern. However, when they saw them working, no one was stupid enough to occupy a spot to drink. They either left or stood at the base of the wall to watch the show. At this time, the base of the wall was filled with people, and this spot was indeed something they hadn't noticed. If Gu Fei hid behind the table for the second time, and used instant movement to blend into the crowd, it would still be feasible. Everyone was sure of this deduction, but they didn't show it on their faces. Instead, they were certain that Gu Fei had left. The few people who were guarding the entrance had already left, looking like they were about to retreat. It's fake. At this time, a player beside Gu Fei whispered to him. Pretend to leave and wait for you to appear before coming back. You can even see through this. You're not simple. Gu Fei was indeed in the crowd, and as soon as he appeared, he was discovered by the people around him. However, the main quality of the bystanders was that they would watch a good show and not mind things getting out of hand. Moreover, Gu Fei was alone at this time, and these people were a group. No one understood the grudges between them, so they would definitely lean towards Gu Fei's side, who seemed to be the weaker one. As a result, when Gu Fei hid among them, the people who knew about it all laughed in secret. No one said anything, especially the person who was talking to Gu Fei. He immediately started a conversation with Gu Fei, and the two chatted happily. Hearing Gu Fei's praise, this person curled his lips in disdain and said, There are only 2 exits. You didn't leave and you didn't die. I don't even need to think to know that you're still here. Look at how ignorant you are. Who said that not leaving and not dying means that I'm still here? Gu Fei said. What else could it be? The person asked. Look at this. Gu Fei showed him the Wind Chaser emblem. I have a completed bounty quest on me. If I want to leave, I can teleport away. How did you get this? The person's eyes widened. 100 bounty quests. How long would that take? After listening to Gu Fei's explanation, the person's eyes widened even more. In the eyes of most people, bounty quests were laborious and unrewarding. If they didn't need to clear PK, who would be willing to do that? This guy had played the game for so long, but he still hadn't had the honor of having PK points. Alright, I can't talk to you anymore. They're all leaving. Gu Fei began to squeeze out of the crowd. What are you doing? The person was shocked. Accumulating PK points. Gu Fei said as he walked out. Suddenly, a white light rose up in the tavern. Everyone was surprised. The most common situation with white light was when a person disappeared. White light rose up in a place where no one was. This could only be seen when offline players came online. After all, things like teleport scrolls weren't common, so it wasn't common to see people teleport everywhere. Yi Xiaowu and the others were really just pretending to leave. Apart from the thieves who were quietly lying in ambush, the others were also paying attention to the situation in the tavern when they left. At this moment, when the white light rose up, several people who hadn't left immediately stopped and looked back. Chapter 629. The seasoned soldiers were really quick-witted. When they saw the abnormal white light rising, they immediately formed a fan-shaped encirclement. regardless of who it was. Several people who had already retreated out of the door were summoned and rushed in again. No one knew who the white light was, but they couldn't deny that it was not Gu Fei. Did he get disconnected in an accident? Yi Xiaowu muttered. The quality of the parallel world servers was excellent, and the network in this era was also excellent, but it couldn't withstand natural and man-made disasters. For example, a sudden power outage or the network cable was cut by some goddamn person. It would be strange if he didn't get disconnected in such a situation. The white light quickly faded, and a player appeared inside. Yi Xiaowu and the others almost thought that it was Thousand Miles drunk. However, when they saw that the player's attire was completely different, they hesitated and didn't open fire on the spot. After taking a closer look, they saw clearly that this person looked a bit like Qianli, but he was definitely not Qianli. After this person appeared, a group of people pointed their crossbows at him. After looking around, they felt that this place was very unfamiliar, and a look of surprise appeared on their faces. Yi Xiaowu and the others muttered in their hearts. This person was undoubtedly not the drunkard from 1,000 Li, but the problem was that he really looked like the drunkard from 1,000 Li. Wasn't his appearance a little too coincidental? When they didn't know what to do, a person squeezed out from the corner of the wall and greeted the guy who appeared in the tavern by stepping on the white light. "Why are you here?" The person turned his head when he heard the voice and saw Gu Fei. He was also quite surprised and then asked, "Where is this?" This question confused Gu Fei. He looked at him and said, "Are you still in a daze from sleep?" This person's expression was indeed very sleepy, and he looked around blankly again. Yi Xiaowu and the others didn't have the leisure to watch Gu Fei chat with others. As soon as they saw Gu Fei appear, they opened fire again without mercy. Since Gu Fei dared to come out, he was certainly on guard. He jumped and flipped behind a table. Now the tables were piled up together while water-breaking arrow and the others were investigating, making it even more crowded. Once Gu Fei dodged, he didn't even need to flip over the tables, and he immediately disappeared. The veterans cried. They thought of a saying, "The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear." While the veterans were preparing to attack Gu Fei, they saw that the guy who had just come out was acquainted with Gu Fei. They were worried that he would lend a hand, so the crossbows in their hands were pointed at him. The man was very dissatisfied. He looked at the people pointing at him and said, "Why are you pointing at me? He's there." Old Lei and Dalei threw another round of bombs over there. In the fire, Gu Fei popped his head out and scolded that guy. "Gu Xian, you are too mean. Even if you don't want to help me, don't frame me." Gu Xian did not think much of it. He calmly walked toward the foot of the wall amidst the hail of bullets from the veterans. The veterans found that he was not going to help Gu Fei, so naturally, he was not their enemy. Seeing him so rashly shuttling through the lines of attack, they began to worry about him. One of them found that an arrow was flying toward him when Gu Xian took a step forward. He shouted, "Be careful." But then he saw Gu Xian casually raise his hand and pull the arrow to one side. Everyone looked at the freak who suddenly appeared in astonishment. Gu Fei saw this scene in the pile of tables and sighed with emotion. Logically speaking, Gu Xian, a guy who never practiced martial arts, shouldn't have such a fast reaction. But there was no other way. This guy was born with a fast reaction. Otherwise, how could he be called a genius? But it seemed that his reaction level had improved. Thinking of this, Gu Fei popped his head out again and shouted, "You have a fast reaction. Are you playing a game?" The veterans fainted. As expected, Gu Fei moved among the tables again. This time his head popped up in a different position than before. Poor Old Thunder and Big Thunder were still foolishly shooting at the previous position. Gu Xian ignored Gu Fei. He walked to the foot of the wall and found a player who was watching the scene. He asked, "Where is this?" "White Foam Tavern." The player answered and looked at Gu Xian strangely. "I mean which main city?" Gu Xian said, "Baishur City." "Fuck." Gu Xian cursed angrily. Only then did he have the time to look back at Yi Xiaowu and the others. These guys had once again expanded their range to surround Gu Fei. But this time, in order to prevent him from sneaking into the crowd again, they asked for the cooperation of the players in the nearby corner. Gu Xian looked at the players around him and asked, "Who are these people?" "I don't know. Gu Xian couldn't get an answer, so he simply shouted at the top of his voice, Gu Fei, what did you do this time? Can't you be quiet? Before Gu Fei could answer, Yi Xiaowu's heart had already skipped a beat. This guy called Qianli drunk, but it wasn't his in-game ID. Gu Fei. Was this Qianli drunk's real name? If that was the case, then they knew each other in real life. It was impossible for him not to help. Nowadays, the times were changing with each passing day. The internet was becoming more and more accepted by people. Friends made on the internet might not be as close as those made in real life. But friends in real life were, after all, frequently seen. For example, if this person was your colleague, even if you didn't have a good relationship with him, it would be very awkward when they met at work the next day, even if he asked you for a favor in the game. It was not conducive to unity. If this person was your boss, you would hate him but still have to help him. Friendship on the internet might be more based on pure feelings, but relationships in real life were often mixed with interests, and the two couldn't be compared in parallel. So when Yi Xiaowu realized that Gu Xian and Gu Fei knew each other in real life, he immediately dared not let his guard down. Just now, this person had actually sent an arrow flying with a slap. Was this something an ordinary person could do? Could it be? Yi Xiaowu looked at Gu Xian. Although Gu Fei was nowhere to be seen, his voice flew out from the pile of tables. It was as if Yi Xiaowu was implying something to Gu Xian. This person is called Red Dust Smile. He's a game worker. He said that I was affecting the balance of the game, so he came to help me. Hongchen Yi Xiao? Who is it? Gu Fei just spoke and didn't point. Gu Xian still didn't know which one was Hongchen Yi Xiao. He only found that someone had been staring at him. He couldn't help but look at Yi Xiaowu. It's you? Yi Xiaowu nodded. Game worker, right? Gu Xian walked over and said, let me give you some advice about this game. Yi Xiaowu was originally cautious and didn't want to get close to Gu Xian. Who knew that Gu Xian would say such a thing? Gu Xian was startled and continued, I'll accept the penalty of money, level, skill mastery, and equipment for forcefully going offline, but you can't teleport me randomly. I forcefully went offline in Xiaoyu City, but now I'm actually online. What city is this? Gu Xian turned back and asked the player. Baishur City, the person answered in a daze. Baishur City? Why did I come to Baishur City when I was online? Forcefully going offline is like this? You didn't say anything. I've never encountered this before. What's going on? How many main cities are here in Xiaoyu City? In the game, the distance between two cities was basically balanced. So when players said that the distance between two cities, the unit was city. One city meant that there were two main cities next to each other, and two cities naturally meant that there was a city in the middle. 3 cities. Yi Xiaowu answered. 3 cities? Fuck. Gu Xian had already reached Yi Xiaowu's side. Once he heard the answer, he went berserk and reached out to grab Yi Xiaowu's neck. You casually teleported me outside of the 3 cities? Do you have any sense of responsibility? I forcefully went offline every day because I didn't want to go that way. Now you're telling me to go back to Xiaoyu City through the 3 cities? Do you want to die? Gu Xian roared. This guy's ID, Windstring, was also one of the top 10 grandmasters of combat. He was also one of the top experts in the game. A weak cleric like Yi Xiaowu was like a chicken in his hands. Yi Xiaowu's face turned green. When this guy first said that he was giving his opinion, he was still quite serious. He didn't expect that he would say something like this. Moreover, he turned on him so quickly. He was still amiable at first, but suddenly his health was dropping. Yi Xiaowu realized that after this guy's forceful grip on his neck, it caused minor damage. His health was slowly dropping. What was worse was that this feeling of suffocation was very uncomfortable. Water-breaking Arrow and the others were not far from Yi Xiaowu, but they didn't expect this guy to suddenly go berserk and take Yi Xiaowu down. This group of veterans had a deep-rooted idea again. No one fired at Gu Xian immediately. Instead, they reached out and signaled for Gu Xian to calm down. They said, "Don't do anything stupid." The formation that was originally surrounding Gu Fei quickly changed, and Gu Xian was now in the center of the circle. Gu Fei, who was among the tables, stood up in a daze. He looked at the situation and said, Is holding a hostage really useful? This reminded Water-Breaking Arrow and the others. Yes, this was a game. People could be resurrected after they died. What was the use of holding a hostage? Everyone thought about it, and prepared to forcefully rescue the hostage. Gu Xian had already seen through this group of people's plans. He quickly reached out and stopped them. Wait, I haven't finished. Everyone subconsciously stopped. Gu Xian continued to ask Yi Xiaowu, if I let you go, can you send me back to the place where I went offline last time? Of course, this kind of thing was impossible. Moreover, Yi Xiaowu had now resigned. However, it was the first time that Yi Xiaowu encountered a situation where there was a mistake in saving the offline location when he went offline by force. It was indeed infuriating to be suddenly transported outside the 3 cities. Yi Xiaowu could understand it, but the problem was that he heard from this guy's words that he frequently used to go offline by force. His equipment, money level, and skills must have been confiscated. He didn't care about these things. Why was he so angry this time after being transported? Compared to that, being transported was not a loss at all. Yi Xiaowu was surprised, but he felt his throat loosen. It was Gu Xian who slightly relaxed the strength in his hand, allowing him to speak. Yi Xiaowu immediately shook his head. This is impossible. Not to mention that Yi Xiaowu had now resigned. Even if he had the authority, it was impossible for him to do this. Any consequences caused by forcefully going offline were borne by the players themselves. This was what the game company had always emphasized. It was impossible to open a back door for anyone. Broken Arrow and the others looked at Gu Xian. They had already received a negative answer, so they wanted to hear what he had to say. In the end, Gu Xian didn't say anything. He grabbed Yi Xiaowu's neck again, and casually threw him. Yi Xiaowu was thrown away like a piece of trash, falling into the corner of the messy pile of tables and chairs. Everyone's gazes were fixed on him, wanting to see what kind of sorry state he would be in. They didn't think that the moment he fell, a white light would rise and Yi Xiaowu would actually be directly killed. Normal players were shocked at the damage of this body-hugging throw. They didn't think that this random guy was actually a ruthless person. This guy was indeed ruthless, but normal players' thinking was wrong. He was ruthless. The moment he threw Yi Xiaowu out, he even punched and kicked him. Normal players didn't notice, but how could experts with sharp eyes like Gu Fei and the others not see it? TSK. Gu Fei shook his head and flipped out from the pile of tables. He looked at Gu Xian with disdain and said, "It's not good to vent your anger on others." Gu Xian's gaze was unexpectedly helpless. He let out a long sigh and said, "The distance between the 3 cities, my heart is already dead. You're lazy until you die." Gu Fei didn't pay any more attention to him. Instead, he looked at Broken Arrow and the others. What, do we continue? Speaking of which, Gu Fei didn't have any ill feelings towards this group of veterans. He could see that they were a group of straightforward men. Hong Chenixia was Broken Arrow's friend. People like them would naturally do anything for a friend. They emphasized the word loyalty, which had been passed down as a virtue since ancient times, but was often ridiculed in today's world. People couldn't do this word, so they criticized it more. They talked about the harm of feudal concepts and so on. All of them stood at the highest point of right and wrong, elaborating on the destructiveness of this word. But even the law was nothing more than human feelings. If one only emphasized the righteousness of the rules and didn't care about human feelings, then they wouldn't be human, but a parallel world system. Gu Fei looked at this group of veterans and knew that they wouldn't give up so easily. The sacrifice of a comrade was the most painful thing for these people. But at this time in the game, when they thought that their fallen comrade could immediately be resurrected at the resurrection point, this group of veterans actually experienced a great sense of happiness. It was just that every time this happened, everyone would always think of their comrades who sacrificed their lives on the real cruel battlefield. For a moment, their expressions would also be a little gloomy. But soon, everyone adjusted their mentality. As soon as Gu Fei finished his question, they immediately raised their bows, raised their crossbows and threw their bombs. They all launched an attack together. Mountain Axe, who thought that he was more skilled in close combat, saw that Gu Xian was obviously also a martial artist. He immediately gave up on shooting from a long distance and pounced forward bravely. Gu Xian and Gu Fei both came from the Gu family, so their martial arts were naturally of the same origin. But in the game, there was a significant difference between the two. Gu Xian had strength, while Gu Fei didn't. As a result, there was a stark difference between the two of them. Mountain Axe also chose to be a grandmaster of combat, so he didn't have any suppression on Gu Xian in terms of strength. The two of them exchanged punches and kicks, which was quite similar to the battle between Bai Yan Jingjing and Mountain Axe in the morning. But although Gu Xian knew martial arts, he actually didn't practice martial arts. He didn't have the deep-rooted concerns that Gu Fei and the others had developed in the process of learning martial arts. Just by looking at how he locked Yi Xiaowu's throat just now, it could be seen that this guy was very violent when he used martial arts. This was something that Mountain Axe could feel more directly. The martial artist in front of him was very different from Gu Fei and Bai Yan Jingjing. This guy stabbed people's eyes, dug out their hearts, and kicked their genitals. He really used all kinds of vicious methods. If this was brought to reality, it would basically be a death sentence. Although Mountain Axe lost to Gu Fei in the morning, he actually only fought with Gu Fei for a few rounds, so he didn't know much about Gu Fei. On the contrary, the fierce battle with Bai Yan Jingjing gave him a better understanding of Bai Yan Jingjing. It was in the process of fighting with Bai Yan Jingjing that he realized that most of the martial artists' moves avoided the strong points and focused on the weak points. They were very skillful, but their damage was relatively low. Even after Gu Fei refuted his ideas and defeated him, he still had doubts about Kung Fu because holding grapes was not a serious matter, and Gu Fei's final move to kill him relied on the sudden change of skills in the game. This doubt was finally dispelled in the process of fighting with Gu Xian. Gu Xian knew all the moves of the Gu family, but he didn't practice them in real life, nor did he fight with them. Naturally, no one admonished him, and he naturally didn't have the same thoughts as Gu Fei or Bai Yan Jingjing. He really used whatever moves he needed to use. He didn't go easy on his opponent, nor was he polite. Everything he did was to kill his opponent. During the first 5 rounds, the two of them attacked and defended. After the 10th round, Mountain Axe was already at a disadvantage. After the 15th round, Mountain Axe felt a chill in his heart. Like Gu Fei, he often thought about what would happen if this was reality, when he fought with others. It was fine to think about it normally, but he still thought about it when fighting with Gu Xian. The more he thought about it, the more he felt a chill in his heart. If he didn't die after fighting with this person, he would definitely be skinned, have his bones broken, be blinded, lose his ears, and have his penis broken. This was even more terrible than death. The overwhelming momentum he had when fighting with Bai Yan Jingjing gradually disappeared, because of the chill in his heart. Mountain Axe finally witnessed with his own eyes how terrifying Kung Fu could be in actual combat. He completely believed what Gu Fei had said before. What you guys have mastered is only a shortcut. If you really want to spend your energy on this, you guys don't have the time. After the 20th round, Mountain Axe was finally taken out by Gu Xian. He swung his arm and threw it again. This time he didn't fall to his death. Instead, he used it as a hidden weapon and threw it at Old Lei Dalei, who threw the bomb. Old Lei Dalei paused the bombardment of spells to dodge. Gu Xian looked at the sea of fire that was blasted out by the two of them in disdain. You're so useless. You dare to come out and directly fight with others? You've completely lost the face of the Gu family. Fuck, so you only want to deal with one. Gu Fei's voice came from the other side. The seasoned soldiers went crazy again. You've been watching so closely. Why did it move again? Teleportation was too shameless. What kind of game was this? It didn't make sense at all. Gu Xian and the other seasoned soldiers could also see that he was not inferior to Gu Fei. However, their main mission was to deal with Gu Fei after all. They didn't want to cause trouble for unrelated people, so the focus of their attacks wasn't on Gu Xian. Mountain Axe took the initiative to attack, and the others didn't help much. Now that Mountain Axe had lost, and Gu Fei was weaving in and out of the pile of tables, it was too difficult to deal with. Take them down one by one. Sniper God sent a message in the channel. Everyone nodded and accepted the order. They no longer insisted on fighting with Gu Fei. Everyone turned their arrows to Gu Xian, who was standing in front of them. In the end, Gu Xian leaped into the pile of tables on the side in an extremely smooth manner. Useless. On the other side, Gu Fei saw that Gu Xian was doing the same thing as him and was very disdainful. Chapter 630. Gu Xian jumped into the pile of tables and squinted to see Gu Fei, who was also hiding under a table. The pile of tables was like the Great Wall, protecting the two of them. On the other side of the Great Wall were Broken Arrow and the others, who were furious. Go and search. They were afraid that Gu Fei would suddenly appear from a corner and kill them. If they didn't go, only Old Thunder and Daily Eye's grenades were a threat, but they often hit the wrong place. Deal with that one first. He can't teleport. Cover him and get ready to charge. Broken Arrow said. Old Thunder and Daily Eye responded and started throwing grenades. The two of them took turns to use spells to burn Gu Xian's hiding place into a sea of fire. Gu Xian didn't know how to teleport, so it was impossible for him to move silently like Gu Fei. Water-breaking Arrow, and the others were keeping a close eye on the movement over there. Even the slightest movement of the bench and the table wouldn't escape their eyes. They're moving over there. Sniper God was indeed a sniper. He had the sharpest eyesight. He immediately saw the slight movement of the chairs and tables, and pointed at it to warn everyone. Of course, in order not to expose their intentions, they wouldn't shout it out. They would only send messages in the channel. The others also saw the movement in the direction that Sniper God was pointing, but it soon stopped. Obviously, the other side didn't want to make too much noise to attract attention. The seasoned soldiers communicated with hand signals and decided on a plan. Old Thunder and Daily Eye continued to bombard the original position, while the others slowly approached the direction of the movement. Be careful, they saw you. At this time, someone shouted from the crowd. Gu Fei and Gu Xian, who were hiding under the tables, might not know the seasoned soldiers' diversion, but the audience outside could see it clearly. Although they couldn't understand their hand signals and didn't know what they were talking about in the channel, they could finally see their intentions when they finally started to move. The seasoned soldiers were very depressed. This was the consequence of not clearing the field during a mission. There were many people in the audience. They didn't know who shouted, so they could only stare helplessly. With such a troublemaker, the seasoned soldiers had to speed up their actions. The people who rushed forward stopped tiptoeing and immediately rushed to their destination. Old Thunder and Big Thunder suddenly changed the direction of their attacks, and each threw a spell in the area where everyone was charging. From these two spells, it could be seen that although these two were not good at games, they were quite proficient in things related to their skills. For example, after these two spells were thrown out like missiles, they didn't hurt their own people at all. The range of the spells completely covered the designated area. A group of people charged through the area as if they were overturning chests and cabinets, but they were once again dumbfounded. The pile of tables was clearly empty. Impossible, I'm not seeing things. Sniper God was shocked, but he believed what he was seeing. Fortunately, you have such good eyesight. A voice rang out beside them. Gu Fei and Gu Xian suddenly charged out together. With his teleportation, Gu Fei's position was erratic. The seasoned soldiers didn't dare to hope that they could pinpoint his position. However, the place where he appeared was exactly where he was. It turned out that he hadn't moved at all. He had only used some unknown method to create a slight movement here. We've fallen for their diversion. The seasoned soldiers cried. They had wanted to create a diversion, but they didn't expect to fall for their opponent's diversion from the start. The two people who had rushed out from the pile of tables didn't attack the people who had come to find trouble with them. Instead, they rushed to the left and right of the tavern's two entrances. Gu Fei swung his sword horizontally, and the dual flame flash, which spun 720 degrees, floated over. The seasoned soldiers knew that Gu Fei's spell damage was abnormally high. They might die if they touched it, so they didn't dare to go straight for it. They could only helplessly choose to retreat. Some people wanted to see if there was an opening to capture Gu Fei, but they saw that Gu Fei's circle was extremely smooth. The flames burned all over his body, and he resisted even more than the resistance ring of fire. When the flames were gone, Gu Fei had already turned and left the tavern. On the other side, Gu Xian was even more carefree than Gu Fei. After running out from the pile of tables, He casually borrowed a chair from the side and put his leg on it. Then he directly flew over the heads of the two people guarding the door. How could the two let him go so easily? They both reached out to grab him, but Gu Xian, who was flying in a straight line, suddenly landed vertically in midair. He kicked the person on the right and grabbed the person on the left. With a swing of his hand, he threw the person on the back at the pursuers, and then he himself dashed out of the door. This. The players who watched the two of them fight were dumbfounded. The seasoned soldiers were skilled in real combat, but their understanding and usage of in-game skills were relatively weak. They couldn't compare to many ordinary players. At this time, the mage players were amazed at the rippling effect of the dual flame flash that Gu Fei had just used before he left the door, while the Grandmaster of Combat players were shocked at the skill that Gu Xian used when he rushed out. Gu Xian stepped on the chair and jumped out. In fact, it was not a normal jump. During the jump, he also used the Grandmaster of Combat's Galloping Meteor. Halfway through, he cancelled the skill with precision and used Flying Swallow Slash, which resulted in the sudden fall. After that, the body-hugging throw looked normal to the ordinary players, but the one who was thrown out had a deeper understanding of it. The grab coincided with the angle at which he rushed up, so he couldn't dodge at all. Seeing the two of them escape just like that, the seasoned soldiers were extremely depressed. Sniper God, who had made the wrong judgment because of his good eyesight, was even angrier. At this time he looked at the original hiding place of Gu Xian for a moment and suddenly said, "Old Lei and Daily Eye kept bombarding this place. If that guy didn't move, how is he not dead? How much HP does he have?" This question was very in-game. None of the people present were familiar with game data, so they were momentarily stumped. Water-breaking Arrow, who had the most experience in the game, also felt that this question should not have been answered. At that time, Old Lei and Daily Eye had thrown a number of spells at this place. Indeed, no matter who hid here and did not move, it should be enough to exhaust their HP. Everyone was struggling with this question. Water-breaking Arrow even sent a message to Yi Xiaowu for advice, but he heard someone in the crowd laughing. At this time, the excitement was over, and the onlookers were all enjoying the embarrassment of this group of people after they failed. It was like a funny ending left after the climax of a blockbuster film, and it would be a pity if they didn't watch it. The onlookers were discussing the battle just now, and the guy who had laughed glanced at the seasoned soldiers, pointed at the place where Gu Xian was hiding, and explained to the people around him. As soon as Water-breaking Arrow and the others saw this person's position, they knew that the group of people there could have seen Gu Xian's hiding place just now. The veterans could also see that the spectators didn't have a good impression of them, because they had the advantage in numbers. If they directly went up to ask, they might be rebuffed. After Water-breaking Arrow signaled with his eyes, a thief tacitly understood. He activated stealth and went up to scout. While listening to the discussion of the players on the other side, he quickly broadcast it to everyone in the channel. Hearing the truth, the seasoned soldiers vomited blood again. It turned out that Gu Xian's hands and feet were hooked onto the table in midair when he attacked with the spell. In this way, the heaven-falling fire wheel that fell from the sky was blocked by the table, and the flaming 3,000 layers flame that ignited on the ground was not hurt because he did not touch the ground. This is shameless. Old Thunder and Big Thunder were speechless after hearing this answer. They were not young anymore, but in the end, they used such a childish word as shameless. The others could only smile bitterly and look at each other. Now they completely understood that the game was a game, and the reality was reality. Not to mention teleportation, now he could block the seemingly arrogant spell attack with a broken table. And when Gu Xian left, he could ignore the physical inertia and fall straight down with one skill cancelled. These were all impossible things in reality. A fall into the pit. A gain in your wit. Everyone learn well. Water-breaking Arrow said. Old Broken Arrow, you played longer than us. Someone said. I'm old, not like young people. Water-breaking Arrow said. Sigh, it seems that we are really old. Everyone was very depressed. They were just a group of retired veterans, and although the game could allow them to regain the physical strength and skills they had when they were young, they were helpless when it came to accepting new things on a spiritual level. This might be the sorrow of old people, as it was always easier for young people to learn new things. Let's retreat first. The seasoned soldiers were about to leave dejectedly, but at this moment, the door was suddenly pushed open. Gu Fei poked his head in, looked at them and said, "What are you doing? You still haven't come out after such a long time." The seasoned soldiers were stunned and looked at the crowd. From Gu Fei's words, did he mean that he was waiting for them outside the door? Didn't they have a hard time rushing out of the tavern? You? The seasoned soldiers didn't know what to ask. "Come out quickly. Fighting inside the house is a hindrance. Let's fight outside," Gu Fei said. "Good boy. I'm starting to admire you." Sniper God was immediately energized. He rolled up his sleeves and was ready to fight again. However, before he could even take 2 steps, a person flashed in front of him and stopped him. After saying a few words, Sniper God's eyes widened. "What? Compensation?" After saying this, he circled around the person and looked him up and down. In the end he asked, "Are you an NPC?" The NPC had probably never met such a low IQ question in his life. This was very different from the high AI they were promoting, so he was momentarily stunned. On the other hand, the crowd was already roaring with laughter. Of course it was an NPC. Who didn't know the NPC in the tavern? Water-breaking Arrow smiled bitterly. His brothers were all dragged into the game to help him. Once they entered, they crazily leveled up in the wilderness. Other than that, they did a few group quests under Yi Xiaowu's organization. The NPCs were all handled by Yi Xiaowu. His brothers just ran around and killed monsters. Their game life was very monotonous, so they didn't have much interaction with NPCs. This was even the first time they came back to the tavern. Water-breaking Arrow didn't feel the slightest bit embarrassed by Sniper God's joke. Instead, he felt apologetic. There was a lot of content in the game, but his brothers only cared about killing monsters and leveling up. They really neglected a lot of fun. They were all doing it to help him. "Yes, you have to pay." Water-breaking Arrow patted Sniper God's shoulder. "How much?" "I don't have any money." Sniper God had a shameless expression on his face. Water-breaking Arrow immediately recalled how he used to play cards with his comrades. In theory, gambling was strictly forbidden, but in private, everyone would bet on it. Every time this guy lost, he would act like a scoundrel and refuse to admit it. "This money. You might have to pay a lot." Gu Fei was still sticking his neck out at the door and interrupted after seeing what was happening. He was an expert in this area. He had been in and out of many taverns during the wanted quest. Flipping tables and kicking chairs was a common occurrence. Gu Fei didn't know the rules of the system, but most of the time, he was the one asking for compensation. Like Little Ray's Bar, which was run by players, it was fine. They just needed to help tidy up the place and give them a small amount of money. The other side wouldn't make things too difficult for them. When players wanted to do business, they needed to be friendly. However, when it came to a tavern owned by the system, not a single copper could be spared. There was no way they could be accommodated. Gu Fei's attacks were quick, accurate, and ruthless. Killing people usually didn't cause too much of a commotion. His highest record was flipping 3 tables. However, the veterans were now very powerful. They cleaned up the entire tavern. Moreover, this tavern was very big. There wasn't a tavern this big in Cloud City. If they had to pay for it, even Gu Fei couldn't estimate how much it would cost. How much? The group of players didn't care about Gu Fei anymore. They all asked Sniper God if the NPC was talking to him. In fact, they still had a lot of questions. For example, if they were to PK again and everyone died at the revival point, would the NPC chase them to the revival point to ask for money? For example, if they forcefully left the game and never came back, wouldn't the money become a bad debt? How much? I forgot. How much? Sniper God asked the NPC again. 3,216 gold, 14 silver, 54 copper, the NPC announced. The players all booed. They didn't expect the system to be so dark. They didn't know how these bits and pieces of money were calculated. This time, everyone sympathized with the veterans. How could they feel good after offending the system? These people didn't look like rich people. They didn't know if they could come up with 3,000 gold. What would happen if they couldn't? No one had encountered this kind of situation before. They started a heated discussion. Who has money? Sniper God asked. Everyone looked at the ceiling. Once they entered the game, they only cared about leveling up. How could they have money? Money from killing monsters. That small amount of money in copper was now seen as trash by the players. Many people didn't even bother to pick it up. Some of the more sinister players saw Gu Fei mingle with the group of people as if nothing had happened. They became suspicious and wondered if this guy had shamelessly schemed against these poor players. Hating the rich was a common trait in many people. Suddenly, some people who thought of this began to dislike Gu Fei. What do we do if we don't have money? Can we walk? Gu Fei continued to stretch his neck and ask. You. Everyone was speechless. 3,000 gold was definitely a huge amount of money. If it was a few days ago, Gu Fei would have thought so too. But now, even though he only casually carried a few bags of money, as long as it was in the thousands, it was no longer in his sight. Seeing that these people didn't have money, Gu Fei randomly pulled out a bag of gold and threw it in. Pay up first. Everyone was speechless again. The bag of money was thrown at Sniper God. Before he could think, the bag was already in front of him. He caught it and realized that everyone was staring at him. Sniper God hurriedly raised his hand and threw the bag back. There's no need for that. The eyes of the spectators almost fell out of their sockets. They couldn't figure out the relationship between the two parties. Enemy? The enemy was willing to give a few thousand gold to someone else so easily? Take it. I've been rich lately. I have more money than I can use. Gu Fei said and threw it back. When it came to getting rich, most people would say it in a low-key and humble manner. However, not only did Gu Fei not do so, he even described it as too much to use up. He simply looked like a nouveau riche. It was true that he did not take money seriously, but in the eyes of the public, his image was being ruthlessly ruined by himself. The bag of money flew back and Sniper God caught it again. Before his brothers could stare at him, he quickly threw it back and said firmly, "There's no need." Gu Fei scratched his head. Then what do we do? The veterans were going crazy. You don't have to worry about that, do you? I've been waiting for you for a long time, Gu Fei said. Come in, we'll fight here, the veterans said. I can't use it, and I have to pay for messing things up, Gu Fei said. At the mention of paying, the veterans' eyes dimmed again. They didn't even have an explanation for this. Water-breaking arrow immediately messaged Yi Xiaowu to explain the situation. Yi Xiaowu was on his way here, and could take out the 3,000 gold. Water-breaking arrow finally sighed in relief. But when Yi Xiaowu asked about the situation, Water-breaking arrow really didn't know what to say. What to say? Tell him that Gu Fei had run away but was now back. He was leaning against the door and chatting with them. Did he still want to borrow money from them? When the onlookers saw that this seemed to be going on, some of them who were about to leave stopped in their tracks. But there were still some people who ran to the outside of the tavern. They felt that these two didn't really want to fight with this group of people outside. They must have already set up some kind of trap. But when they came out and walked around, they saw the Grandmaster of Combat squatting outside. Other than that, they didn't see anything else. Could there be a large number of bandits hiding? The onlookers muttered. Some continued to look around, and some returned to the tavern. While they were wasting time, a bystander suddenly rushed in from outside the tavern. He glanced at the veterans and wanted to say something but didn't dare. Instead, he turned to his friends and announced loudly, "The cleric is back," but just as he reached the door, he was caught by the Grandmaster of Combat and killed. What? Water-breaking arrow and the others were stunned. What did this mean? It seemed like they were stuck in the tavern and couldn't leave, and their supplies had been cut off. Just as they were wondering what to do, Gu Xian also pushed the door open and came in. He said unhappily, "Why aren't they out yet? Why did you kill Hongchen Yixiao again?" Gu Fei asked. "I ran him to death," Gu Xian said and then asked, "Is this far from the priest academy?" "Not far," someone answered. Gu Xian's face was full of disappointment. "If you are so resentful and want to go back, I can actually help you," Gu Fei suddenly said. "Oh, what do you have in mind?" Gu Xian asked quickly. "I'll kill you." Gu Fei said. Chapter 631. Gu Fei's hack you to death plan was feasible. In the game, the resurrection point was based on one's account. Gu Xian was moved to Whitestone City as soon as he logged on. In theory, he shouldn't have an account in Whitestone City. As soon as he died, he would naturally return to Xiaowu City. Gu Xian furrowed his eyebrows and calculated. This way, I can go back, but I'll lose a level. Moreover, going back isn't where I log off, so it's not worth it. Do you care about something like losing a level? You're someone who often logs off. Gu Fei said. Look at you, don't you have no experience? I've never encountered a situation where I lost a level by forcefully logging off. Normally, it's just experience, but the most common thing is losing equipment. Gu Xian said. Won't money also drop? Gu Fei asked. Money can be deposited in the bank. Gu Xian said with disdain. That's right, before I came in. I heard you say that you recently made a fortune? Gu Xian asked. Yes, I made a studio and developed an efficient leveling method. Gu Fei gestured with his hands and feet. As a kung fu user, Gu Xian immediately understood what an efficient leveling method was all about. As a matter of fact, even if they didn't take the initiative to develop an efficient leveling method, these people would naturally come up with this efficient method when they were leveling up with the robot monsters. It was just that they wouldn't consciously think about it. No wonder a lot of people have been asking me if I have an efficient leveling method. So it's because of you. Gu Xian said. Why would people ask you? Gu Fei said. Your brother, is also a famous kung fu master in Xiaowu City. Gu Xian said. Tsh. Gu Fei disdainfully said. In his heart, he didn't think of Gu Xian as someone who knew kung fu. It was just that the illusory medium of the internet gave him a chance to perform. In reality, this guy was at most addicted to kung fu in his head. He didn't have the physical ability to use kung fu anymore. The two stood at the door and chatted. The veterans couldn't go up and fight, but if they didn't know what to do. The crowd of onlookers began to jeer. Water-breaking Arrow urgently asked Yi Xiaowu what would happen if he didn't have money to pay and insisted on leaving the meeting. Besides, there were more than 10 of them. Should they split the 3,000 gold coins equally, or should someone pay for it, or what? Yi Xiaowu, who had just been killed by Gu Xian, was also depressed. The setting that Water-breaking Arrow was inquiring about was quite complicated, and he couldn't explain it clearly in a short time. At that time, when they were designing this section, some people thought that they might as well make everything in the tavern invincible, unchangeable and indestructible. Perhaps they could even make the tavern a safe zone, which would save them a lot of trouble. But later on, because the game was meant to be realistic, the boss didn't allow the details of life to be so vague. Things in life scenes like taverns had to be the same as in reality. They could be overturned and broken. But here came the problem. How would he deal with it after it was overturned and broken? It was just like the trash in the leveling area. Once it reached a certain point, it would all return to its original state. At this time, the boss's capitalist nature came back again. If he broke something, of course he had to pay. Come up with a compensation mechanism. The boss's words had stumped countless planners. In any case, he didn't care. The boss had always created difficulties and relied on his employees to solve them. Frankly speaking, it was easy to come up with a system. The difficult part was how to make the players accept it. Therefore, when the system was first made, the planners had always been nervous. But when the rules of the tavern were announced during the open beta, the players didn't have much of a reaction. Everyone seemed to understand the rule of pay for things that are broken very well. Seeing the players' mentality, the planners were emboldened. They became bolder and bolder. Finally, there was the rule that if the players didn't pay, the system would enforce it. Of course, to be realistic, the enforcement of the system didn't directly change the money from the players' pockets to zero. It would also symbolically send out soldiers to educate the players about the bad behavior of not paying for things that were broken, and then forcibly take the money from the players' pockets. If the money was not enough, the system would seriously inform the players that they owed money, and would continue to confiscate it from the players' pockets until they had enough. This rule was ruthless. The planners were nervous again. wondering if the players who owed money would be so desperate that they would stop playing the game. In the end, it turned out that the planners had habitually underestimated the players' intelligence. Since they knew the rules of the tavern and knew that the system would not care about money, who would be so reckless as to cause trouble in the tavern? Daring to challenge in the tavern had now become a way to compete for wealth in some main cities. If you flipped a table, I'll flip 2. Fuck, if you're so ruthless, I'll flip 3. This kind of person would consider the consequences before making a move. In the end, they were willing to be punished. They even bragged on the forum, "I'm in a bad mood today. I flipped 10 tables in the system tavern." Then there were a bunch of replies. The original poster is rich and lewd. In the end, the ones who were restricted by this rule were the people led by the chief planner. Look at how messed up this matter was. Yi Xiaowu now understood the situation. Water-breaking arrow, and the others wanted to go out and fight with Qianlian drunk. But the problem was that even if they went out, they wouldn't have the chance to do so. Once they left the tavern, the system guards would definitely kill them and force them to pay the fine. If they wanted to have a peaceful environment to fight, they had to pay the fine first. Yi Xiaowu regretted it. If he knew that he would get into trouble like this, he wouldn't have chosen to fight in the tavern. He really didn't think that fighting in the tavern would require flipping the entire tavern. He thought that it would only be flipping a few tables at most. That priest is here to give money. If he comes again, don't kill him. Gu Fei was telling Gu Xian. Aren't you rich? You can lend them first. I have to train his legs today. Gu Xian was stubborn. They won't lend it. Won't it be the same if you wait for him to leave the money behind? Gu Fei said. That's fine. Gu Xian nodded. Water-breaking arrow and the others were going crazy. These two people were deciding their life and death, as if no one else was around. Although as soldiers they understood the saying, strategically look down on the enemy, tactically pay attention to the enemy. Being ignored like this still made them feel very pained. Someone in the tavern fired at the two with a crossbow. The two hurriedly dodged out of the tavern. Some people wanted to chase after them, but were stopped by water-breaking arrows. They weren't afraid of being fined, but they couldn't bear the thought of a system guard coming out to mess with them right now. Yi Xiaowu finally managed to sneak back into the tavern. This time he didn't dare come over directly. After walking to the corner of the street, he stuck his head out and looked over. In the end he saw the two guys fighting at the entrance of the tavern. Is there an internal conflict? Yi Xiaowu was overjoyed and hurriedly came over. There were a lot of onlookers in the tavern. At this time, the two people fighting attracted a lot of attention, but the two still saw Yi Xiaowu sneaking over sneakily. He's back. Gu Fei said to Gu Xian. I saw him, but he seems to be quite happy. What is he happy about? Gu Xian said as he threw a punch. I don't know. Gu Fei dodged and kicked back. Am I not ruthless enough? Gu Xian asked. You are ruthless enough, you are ruthless enough. Gu Fei hurriedly said. Gu Xian's unscrupulous attack was more ruthless than any of the martial artists Gu Fei knew. Even when they were in the game, those deep-rooted scruples were not something they could just ignore. It was a matter of habit. Gu Fei was already considered good. He could still take a detour. Seeing that the Encyclopedia of Classics was so simple, yet he still needed some pointers to be enlightened. Moreover, he still hesitated after breaking someone's arm. I'll go ask him. Gu Xian feinted a punch and floated out, blocking Yi Xiaowu's way. Yi Xiaowu was still paying attention to the two people as he slipped into the tavern. He thought that the two people were so focused on fighting that they didn't notice him. He didn't expect that one of them would suddenly rush over and block him on the spot. With one hand on the wall, he blocked Yi Xiaowu's way. Yi Xiaowu knew that even 10 of him wouldn't be enough to fight. He hurriedly patted the wind-chasing emblem and used the escape quest that he prepared in advance to teleport away. Fuck. Gu Xian was dumbfounded. He opened his mouth but couldn't say a word. Look at you. You scared him away. Gu Fei was exasperated. He guessed that Hongqian Yixiao had teleported to the wanted quest office, which was very far from the tavern. As a poor cleric, it would take him a lot of time to run over. I haven't said anything yet. Gu Xian was depressed. Sigh, I should have told him in advance. He must have thought that you were going to beat him up again. Depressed, Gu Fei opened the friends list and sent a message to Yi Xiaowu. Don't be afraid. I'm not going to kill you. Old Duan and the others are waiting for you to come back and give you money. It seems that you can't leave the tavern without paying. Gu Fei didn't know much about the rules of the game. He was a man of rules, and he had never lacked money in the game. When he caused trouble in the tavern, he gave as much as the boss wanted. He never had the dirty thought of running away without paying. Yi Xiaowu was really about to cry now. When he teleported to the wanted quest office, the white light had not dissipated yet. He blacked out on the spot. When he opened his eyes again, he was already in the priest academy. Yi Xiaowu was startled for a moment before he reacted. He was vomiting blood. When he received the message from Apple Vinegar, he shouted excitedly, "Ha ha ha ha, Qianli's drunken finally died under my blade." Yi Xiaowu really had to suffer in silence. Apple Vinegar's ambush was part of his plan because he deduced that Gu Fei also had the wind-chasing emblem. If the situation was not good, he would probably teleport urgently. At this time, his health was not full, and Apple Vinegar was hiding beside him, so there was a good chance that he could be killed in one hit. Who was Apple Vinegar? He was a murderous demon who had accumulated more than 1,000 PK points. Would he care about an ordinary player's level? Therefore, this guy's plan was to attack as soon as the white light appeared. No matter who it was, he would kill him first. But when he thought that the opponent might be Qianli's drunken, Apple Vinegar did not dare to be careless. He was definitely 120% focused, and his attacks were decisive and clean. In the end, Gu Fei did not even use the wind-chasing emblem, and Yi Xiaowu used it first. Apple Vinegar was not someone who boasted. When he saw the white light, he reacted quickly and used all sorts of big moves. In the end, white light followed white light. Yi Xiaowu sent over a bunch of numbers, but he was killed by Apple Vinegar before he could even spawn 100%. This guy did not see clearly whether the person was Qianli's drunken or not, but there were very few people who had the wind-chasing emblem. Although Apple Vinegar decided to kill him as soon as he saw the white light, he felt that only Qianli's drunken would teleport over. Therefore he immediately boasted to Yi Xiaowu. "Boss, the one you killed was me." Yi Xiaowu was depressed. "You? What are you doing here? Are you here to cause trouble?" Apple Vinegar was in heaven, and when he heard this news he was also depressed. However, the Killer King did not feel any guilt for killing Yi Xiaowu. He only minded that the one he killed this time was not Qianli's drunken. "See clearly before you act." Yi Xiaowu said. "See clearly what?" "That was Qianli's drunken. If he saw clearly, would I be able to kill him?" "Nonsense." Apple Vinegar was extremely unhappy. This guy didn't have the pride of an expert. As long as he could kill someone he wanted to kill, he would feel a sense of achievement. He wasn't like an expert like Sword Demon who sought to surpass you in terms of skill. "Next time if you want to teleport again, tell me first." Apple Vinegar said. Yi Xiaowu was killed by mistake, and he was blamed for it. He was so depressed that he wanted to smash his head against the wall. At this moment, Gu Fei's message also arrived. He explained that Gu Xian didn't want to kill him. He just wanted to welcome him. That day, a level 30 priest stood at the entrance of the priest college for 5 minutes, not moving at all. It was a spectacular sight. Gu Fei and the others were also tired of waiting here, so they had no choice but to enter the tavern again. They spread their hands towards Broken Arrow and the others. "All right, he just arrived, and as soon as he saw us he teleported away again. Tell him that we won't kill him for now." Gu Fei's words were as serious as his personality. "Won't kill him for now" meant that he reserved the right to kill him in the future. At this moment, the spectators had already started whistling. Other than spectating, jeering was also one of their main functions. Perhaps this could be considered as the voice of the masses. As the whistling started, there were already people shouting at the top of their lungs. "Are we going to fight or not? Everyone, don't be anxious." Gu Fei was still in the mood to explain. "Because of an accident, we need to wait a little longer." Then he asked the Whitestone native players, "How long will it take for the wanted mission office to arrive here?" If it's a priest. Gu Fei still didn't know that Yi Xiaowu had been sent back to the priest college. In the time it took for Yi Xiaowu to go back and forth, The two warriors and the Grandmaster of Combat, Mountain Axe, had already returned. The two warriors were killed by Gu Fei's sneak attack. They were dissatisfied, but now that they understood the situation, they obeyed the organization's arrangements. Mountain Axe, on the other hand, was a little afraid of being beaten up. The strong warrior who disregarded life and death on the battlefield was now terrified by the subversive strength of the opponent's kung fu. If a normal person were to experience this kind of fear, they wouldn't have the qualifications to experience it. This was because normal people couldn't understand the helplessness of fighting an expert with all their strength. If a normal person came up, they would be instantly defeated. What was there to be helpless about? Let's continue training outside. Gu Fei pulled on Gu Xian. He discovered that this cousin of his in-game was really a good training opponent. I'm not going, it's boring. Gu Xian said. How could that be? Gu Fei said. You're the only one who's crazy about kung fu, okay? Right now my kung fu in-game is used to bully people. If you go out and let me beat you up, then I'll accompany you to train. Gu Xian said. Although Gu Xian was fierce, Gu Fei had been in the game for a long time, and was not as wooden as the 100 Lives of Wisdom. No matter how talented Gu Xian was, he couldn't withstand Gu Fei's 20 years of hard work. Moreover, Gu Fei wasn't a normal person. If Gu Xian's talent was calculated to be 100 points, then Gu Fei would also have 95 points. But with hard work, Gu Xian would have 0 points and Gu Fei 100 points. In total, Gu Xian would still have 100 points and Gu Fei 195 points. This was the difference in reality. Although the game relied on the settings to help Gu Xian make up for his physical condition, 20 years of hard work didn't only train his muscles. The game couldn't simulate other aspects. In this way, even if the game gave Gu Xian a few dozen points, he still wouldn't be able to surpass Gu Fei. This was because Gu Fei's class was a mage and had no strength. His total points had to be deducted, so the two were relatively close. If the two were of the same class and stats, then Gu Xian would also be bullied by Gu Fei. If you want to train so much, go find them. There are so many of them. Gu Xian pointed at the veterans. Aren't we organized? We'll start training when that person comes back. Gu Fei said. The veterans were depressed. In Gu Xian's words, they were bullied, and in Gu Fei's words, they were training partners. Why didn't these two go die? Sniper God slammed the table and wanted to say something, but Water-Breaking Arrow's expression suddenly changed. How did he die again? Who? Everyone asked in shock. Who else? Water-Breaking Arrow said. Hongqian Xiao? What happened? Can he still make it? Gu Fei was more concerned than anyone else. Yi Xiaowu's death wasn't the apple vinegar death. After adjusting his mood at the Priest Academy, he regrouped and headed to the White Foam Tavern. However, before he even walked one street from the Priest Academy, an arrow flew out of nowhere and killed him on the spot. 4 times. In less than 40 minutes, Yi Xiaowu had already died 4 times. Even Non-Smiler wasn't as miserable as he was. Non-Smiler being chased down 10 levels was the result of Gu Fei's hard work for an entire night. People gave him the nickname 10 times a night. If he continued to die at this pace, Yi Xiaowu had a high chance of breaking Non-Smiler's record for the fastest level drop. It was unknown if he would also get a nickname. Someone was watching me. Yi Xiaowu, who had been reborn at the Priest Academy for the 4th time, immediately had this thought. As for who it was, he couldn't think of it. He was level 30 and had a Mu. With the golden ratio and agility, there were many people in the game who could insta-kill him. Yi Xiaowu sent the bad news to Water-Breaking Arrow as he stood at the entrance of the Priest Academy and looked around. He was sure that someone was watching him. That was why he was killed not long after he left. Who could it be? The entrance to the safe zone was always crowded. Players had to pass through this place every day, and it wasn't any less crowded than the professional trade street. In such a crowded area, it would be difficult for Yi Xiaowu to discover the stalker based on his low level of attainment. He was just more familiar with the game settings than anyone else. Chapter 632. Inside the tavern, Broken Arrow and the others didn't know what to do. Yi Xiaowu was killed as soon as he left the Priest Academy. It seemed like someone had their eyes on him. There was no need to worry about who it was. The key was that he definitely couldn't send money over now. Let's go. Broken Arrow gritted his teeth and let everyone out of the tavern. We can leave without paying? Can we? Gu Fei kept mumbling behind them. The veterans were annoyed to death. The tavern attendant didn't stop them. Seeing the veterans walk out, he stood by the door and loudly announced the punishment for not paying for drinks and for breaking things. Gu Fei listened very carefully, because he felt that he needed to know the rules. He didn't know if the system guards teleported here, but Broken Arrow and the others were intercepted by a large group of system guards as soon as they left the tavern. Gu Fei had also turned into a spectator, squeezing into the crowd of other players to watch the show. Normal players hadn't seen such a large group of system guards before, but Gu Fei had. Back in Luminous Village, they were trampled by such a group of guards. Although the veterans were tough, they probably couldn't do anything to this group of city guards. Everyone was waiting to watch the show. Who knew that the city guards didn't have any intention of making a move? Broken Arrow and the others were very calm, and didn't even take out their weapons. They already knew the rules from Yi Xiaowu. Only a life for a life. Everyone just owed a small debt. They didn't have to pay with their lives. The system guards were just a symbolic gesture, because the owner felt that it wasn't logical to empty the players' pockets out of nowhere. The guards announced the rules again, giving all the players a deeper understanding of the tavern's rules. After that, they began to collect fines. To make it look real, the guards came to grab people and directly searched their pockets. The veterans still didn't resist. Yi Xiaowu told them that resistance would only bring them trouble. This was all to make it look real. Everyone just had to cooperate. After all, the system guards wouldn't steal anything from their pockets. More than a dozen people's pockets were all searched. And then the system guards announced how much fines they had forcefully collected, how much money was left, and how they would collect it. The players' horizons were truly widened. After nearly half an hour, the system soldiers finally finished their mission and left. The veterans were finally free, and they hurriedly rushed towards the priest academy. Gu Fei hurriedly jumped out to stop them, shaking his head. If we had known this would be the case, we wouldn't have had to wait so long, right? I thought we would be forced to stay in the tavern if we didn't pay. Let's spar again in the future when we have time. We are in a hurry to save people. Water-breaking Arrow said with a dark face. Gu Fei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Are you muddle-headed? Exchanging pointers is just a formality. Aren't we enemies? The veterans looked at each other in dismay. Originally, they had the advantage in numbers and felt that they were the ones taking the initiative. They could fight and retreat whenever they wanted. How did the situation reverse now? Just two people dared to take the initiative to challenge them and not let them go? Gu Fei said. Don't talk about me. Even if I let you go now, the audience wouldn't agree. Well said. There was a round of applause. The onlookers clapped until their hands were red, their impression of Gu Fei skyrocketing. Thank you, thank you. Gu Fei clasped his hands together in thanks. Breaking Arrow and the others had a straightforward style. They didn't want to say anything more in this situation. Cover retreat. With a single sentence, the veterans calmed down from being angered to death by Gu Fei and Gu Xian. They quickly adjusted to battle mode and split into two groups. The thieves, archers, and mobile players began to retreat while the rest stayed to deal with Gu Fei and Gu Xian. But Gu Fei had already seen through their intentions. He swung his sword, and a wall of electricity blocked the path of those who wanted to retreat and rushed towards them. The veterans were depressed. It was this surreal thing again. They were getting more and more annoyed with it. Can we break through? The veterans had never seen a wall of electricity before, and wanted to try. No, we'll be paralyzed, Breaking Arrow said. After all, he had been with Yi Xiaowu for a long time and knew a lot about Gu Fei. This is his wall of electricity. The veterans had actually been taught a lesson and knew that Gu Fei knew something called wall of electricity, but they didn't know what skill it was without seeing it. These uncles had zero knowledge of the game. Even something as common as fireball couldn't be imagined if you didn't show it to them. They were even worse than Gu Fei when he first entered the game. Go around. Sniper God walked to the wall with his hands in front of him. The others understood and rushed over to step on his palms. Sniper God raised his hand, and the person used the momentum to jump up. He climbed up the wall in 2 or 3 steps. The whole process took less than 2 seconds. Then the second person, the third. A professional. Gu Fei sighed in admiration. The other side had a total of 5 archers and 2 thieves. By the time Gu Fei rushed over, 4 of them had already climbed up. The 5th person had a bit of a problem. He was a middle-aged man who was out of shape. When he tried to climb up, he was blocked by his beer belly. His beer belly was very elastic, and he almost bounced off. Fortunately, Broken Arrow and the others had already grabbed him and dragged him up. This person felt ashamed. The others lamented, "Machine-operated food isn't good." Sigh, "I have to socialize every day." This person sighed. Sniper God and the other person couldn't go up in time. He waved his hand at them. "You guys go first." Then Sniper God ran and pulled out his crossbow and fired at Gu Fei. To be honest, he wasn't in the mood to use the crossbow. He felt that it was too slow, but he had no choice. What else could be more like a gun? Breaking Arrow and the others didn't hesitate and immediately retreated along the roof. Gu Fei didn't bother with the 5 that got lost. It was a pity that he only managed to block 2 people with Wall of Electricity. Wall of Electricity was the spell that consumed the most mana that Gu Fei had. He had used up almost half of it. The rest of the veterans also spread out and found cover. They pulled out their crossbows and shot at Gu Fei and Gu Xian. Gu Xian didn't know what to do. He was waiting for people to rush over and fight with him. In the end, they all scattered in all directions and started shooting. What's the meaning of this? We were hiding in the tavern, but now they're hiding? These people are quite vengeful. Petty. Gu Xian said to Gu Fei. The 2 of them weren't close. Gu Xian shouted and the veterans could hear him. Naturally, it was an internal injury. We're such a professional street fight. How did it become petty? Who's vengeful? In a moment of anger, everyone's firepower was focused on Gu Xian. Pa. The veterans had their reasons for moving around. The range of their crossfire was quite wide. If they really had guns in their hands, even 8 Gu Xian wouldn't have been able to escape. But in the end, the game hurt them. In real life, no matter who it was, the speed of the bullets would be the same when the trigger was pulled. Even the speed of a handgun was faster than the speed of sound. In shoot-'em-up movies, the heroes would often listen to the sound to avoid bullets. Wasn't that ridiculous? That was a distance of 20 to 30 meters. The bullets were faster than the sound of sound. How could they dodge when their heads exploded? In the game, crossbows were far slower than the slowest handguns. Because everyone had different classes, different stats, and different equipment, there was a difference in firing speed. To make up for this difference, the veterans had to revise their teamwork. But they hadn't practiced to this extent yet. Everything was still based on their habits when they were soldiers. After not playing for so many years, it was inevitable that they would be rusty. In addition to the differences in the game settings, there were many flaws in their teamwork. The crossfire that they fired felt like it was a mess and full of loopholes. One by one, they watched as Gu Xian dodged and dodged the firepower and ran behind cover to hide. After that, the kid suddenly raised his hand and shouted, "I'm hiding here. If you want to fight me, come over yourself." "Fuck, you're too lazy." Gu Fei was depressed. He was still entangled with Sniper God and the other archer who hadn't escaped in time. It was a different situation when the 2 of them held crossbows. They were of the same class, had the same stats, and had similar equipment. Even if their firing speed wasn't as fast as a gun, at least when they worked together, they wouldn't be in a situation where one of them could shoot while the other was halfway. The 2 of them kept a distance from Gu Fei and attacked him from both sides, leaving Gu Fei at his wit's end. These 2 were archers who were as fast as him. He couldn't catch up to them by running. Gu Fei had no choice but to dodge the attacks of the 2 while attacking the others. He wanted to find a close combat opponent. Seeing that Mountain Axe was hiding behind a pile of wooden barrels, he thought to himself, "This guy is a fighter, let's go find him." However, Mountain Axe's thoughts were different from Gu Fei's. He was passionate about fighting because it was his best method of killing targets. It was the most powerful weapon for him to complete his mission. However, he knew that this weapon couldn't complete his mission, so of course he wouldn't use it. If he continued to fight with Gu Fei, the other comrades who wanted to shoot at Gu Fei would have a lot of misgivings. So when he saw that Gu Fei was moving towards him, he didn't even think about it before running away. "Sai, why are you running to?" Gu Fei was depressed, pulling his hair. He thought he found a bunch of good opponents to practice with, but these people didn't seem to be passionate about this sport. They just liked to hide and shoot from afar. It seemed that what the old man said was true. The most effective way to defeat an opponent was with a gun. This group of people who had killed on the battlefield clearly understood this principle. If it was a simple race, Gu Fei wouldn't have a problem catching up to Mountain Axe. However, the others weren't just decorations. Because of the game's setting, their firepower coordination had some problems, but even if they couldn't kill Gu Fei, they could still create a lot of obstacles. Under these circumstances, there was no way for Gu Fei to catch up to Mountain Axe. Turning around to chase after the others could only result in this. He wanted to use teleportation to get close to one of them, but the veterans in the tavern were tormented by this skill. It was an insult to their intelligence to not think of Gu Fei's method. Teleportation of 5 to 6 meters. Everyone kept this number in mind. They wouldn't give Gu Fei the chance to get close to anyone. Gu Fei was running all over the field. He hadn't been able to use a single skill for a long time, and he had even been hit by 2 arrows. Fortunately, they weren't shot by the 2 archers, so the damage wasn't that big of a deal. However, his mood was very similar to that of the veterans in the tavern. Control the situation. Retreat in order. Sniper God was the most accomplished in shooting. He had completely experienced everyone's firepower coordination. If they wanted to have a style and level in the game, they needed to get used to it. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have listened to Yi Xiao's nonsense. He said that in the game, all professions had to cooperate, so it was best to pick a spot for each profession. If they were all archers, the situation would be much better. Although they had control of the situation, it would be very difficult to finish off Qianli in a drunken stupor. He was only stubbornly looking for someone to kill. If he gave up on this idea and wanted to leave, everyone's firepower wouldn't be able to stop him. There was a difference in mobility. This guy's mobility was quite strong. If he had known this would happen, he would have chosen archers. What a waste of these guys' skills. Sniper God muttered again. The veterans obeyed and started to retreat from the one furthest from Gu Fei. The first to retreat were the 2 clerics. One of them was Little Chun, who had been killed by the sword demon that day. As soon as he turned his head, he saw a person floating behind the other cleric like a ghost. "Old Wu behind you!" Little Chun shouted. The cleric called Old Wu didn't have time to turn his head. The person behind him pressed down on his head and sent him crashing into the wall. Old Wu's skills were even worse than Little Chen's. This guy used to be a cookhouse soldier. Little Chun would sometimes go on missions with the team, but there was obviously no need to bring someone to cook for them. Therefore, Old Wu's fighting ability was really not worth mentioning. In the end, he was killed, and he didn't even have time to turn around to see who it was. When the others turned around, Old Wu was already gone. Gu Xian was standing there happily. Everyone was going crazy. "Didn't you hide there and not come out? You guys aren't young anymore. Haven't you been tricked before?" Gu Xian said disdainfully. Gu Fei sweated. This was Gu Xian's great diversion technique. He had often been tricked like this when he was young, and he had lost a lot of extra food. "Aren't you guys in a hurry to get to the Priest Academy? Isn't this the fastest method?" Gu Xian smiled as he charged at Little Chen. The veterans were just on guard, not letting Gu Fei get within 5 meters of them. Of course, they didn't have to worry about the distance between them. Little Chun and Old Wu were already preparing to retreat. The two of them were very close, and Gu Xian charged forward like a meteor. The others came to his rescue with arrows. Gu Xian didn't hide anymore. He took a few arrows and dragged Little Chun over to use him as a shield. The rest of the firepower was focused on Little Chun. Then he casually threw Little Chun against the wall, and a pile of white light appeared. Just like that, the 2 clerics took an express delivery to the Priest Academy. Fuck! Sniper God jumped up angrily and started firing at Gu Xian. Gu Xian retracted his head and hid again. He didn't forget to shout again, "I really won't come out this time." Did anyone still believe him? Not only did the veterans not believe him, but they also organized people to surround Gu Xian. Old Lei and Old Lei, the two grenadiers, started firing again. In the end, the pile of sacks at the foot of the wall started to move. Gu Xian had crawled into the pile of sacks. He couldn't reach the sky or the ground, and his spells were wasted. He's trapped in his own cocoon. Sniper God was amused by his actions. He continued to fire at Gu Fei, while moving toward where Gu Xian was hiding. There was a pile of sacks, but Gu Xian was nowhere to be seen. Everyone knew that he had piled himself up in the middle. But then it became awkward again. This was a game. These sacks couldn't be damaged by spells, and arrows couldn't penetrate them. If they wanted to attack him, they had to move the sacks. The veterans communicated in the channel, and the four of them temporarily put down the crossbows in their hands and surrounded them. As they approached, the sacks suddenly exploded. Gu Xian punched and kicked the sacks out one by one, using them as hidden weapons. The four people who went up were at a loss. Gu Xian leaped and kicked the wall, using the same method as the 100 Eras strategist to fly directly to the top of the wall. He sighed and said, "Can't you just stay here for a while?" Sniper God was furious and ordered everyone to fire, but Gu Xian, who was already on the top of the wall, took a few steps back and disappeared. The four people who were in the sacks were indignant. They immediately went up and built a human ladder. Two of them were sent up together. As soon as they showed their heads, Gu Xian appeared again. He raised his left foot and kicked one of them down. The other was so shocked that he didn't want to go up, but Gu Xian grabbed him. Instead of pushing him down, he threw him over his shoulder and onto the roof. The people under the roof didn't know what happened after that. They only saw another white light rise from the roof. The firepower was too concentrated on Gu Xian, so Gu Fei had an opening. He quickly closed the distance, and the veterans couldn't react in time. Gu Fei teleported in front of one of them and slashed. The veterans were still quite skilled, so they weren't completely defenseless. With a flash, they managed to dodge the sword. Gu Fei had expected this. He had deliberately let him dodge the sword. His left hand had already formed a lightning palm, and he slapped it at the gap left by the dodge. With a push of his palm, lightning was released, but the man did not die immediately. The pushing effect of the lightning palm took effect at this moment, and the man was involuntarily sent flying backward, directly crashing into a brother who was standing not far behind him. Gu Fei reacted quickly and used the last bit of magic power he had left to cast another lightning spell. The person flew back, and it was hard to say if he could stand still. How could he dodge this? Lightning fell from the sky, and it was another white light. At this point, Gu Fei had used up all his magic power. He saw that there was a good corner next to him, and he immediately dashed in. He took a fruit and ate it, while he poked his head out to see what the veterans were doing. At this time, Gu Fei and Gu Xian were no longer in their sight. According to the principle of Gu Fei and Gu Xian taking the initiative, and they being passive, this was a good opportunity for them to immediately head to the Priest Academy. However, after such a blow, Gu Fei felt that they might impulsively stay and continue to fight. In the end, when he poked his head out to look, the other party was retreating in an orderly manner, as expected of a professional. Very calm. Gu Fei praised. He silently looked at the route they were retreating, and didn't jump out to stop them. He seriously finished eating the apple. The advantage of people with less magic power was that they had less time to recover their magic power. Gu Fei didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to replenish his magic power, and then set off. According to his calculations, although he started a little late, he still had time to go around in front of these people to intercept them again, who asked him to be an all-agility mage. Chapter 633. On a rooftop tens of meters away from the Priest Academy, the Han family young master was looking in the direction of the Priest Academy with a pair of binoculars. 2 meters behind him, Yutian Shenming climbed onto the roof with great difficulty. He hopped to the side of the Han family young master and asked for the binoculars. "Quick, let me have a look." "What?" The Han family young master didn't give it to him. I want to see his expression. Quick, give it to me. Yutian Shenming snatched the binoculars with all his might, and immediately looked in the direction of the Priest Academy. Normally, one could find someone without the binoculars from this distance. However, Yutian Shenming's current goal was just as he said. He wanted to see Yi Xiaowu's expression after being killed by his arrow. Ha 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 ha, look at him, he's too scared to come out. Yutian Shenming was pleased. He was greatly satisfied when he saw Yi Xiaowu carefully standing behind the door of the Priest Academy and looking around carefully. I'll continue the ambush. Yutian Shenming excitedly returned the binoculars to the Han family young master. However, after running 2 steps, he stood on the edge of the roof in a daze. Left, the Han family young master said without turning his head. Tsk, I know. I don't need you to tell me that. Yutian Shenming jumped off the roof and ran to his sniper position on the left. I think he's too scared to come out. The Han family young master put down the binoculars and said to his brother Yu beside him. Brother Yu grabbed the binoculars and looked around. He mumbled. Then let's continue. Alright, you keep an eye on him. I'll make the arrangements. The Han family young master turned his head and jumped off the roof. After passing through a street, Sword Demon, and Scathed in Battle, 100 Generations Classic, and Jian Nanyu's group of 7 were already waiting here. When they saw him, they immediately asked, how did it go? Everything went well. Everyone get ready. The Han family young master said. Damn, Qianli is so fierce. Everyone muttered and scattered. The Han family young master had already said that Hongchen Yixiao would definitely be sent to the resurrection point by Gu Fei, but no one believed him. After all, that group of seasoned soldiers had extraordinary skills, and Hongchen Yixiao might not directly participate in the battle. However, the Han family young master's deduction was based on the fact that the conversation between the 2 parties would definitely be face-to-face. If the negotiation failed, with Gu Fei's straightforward personality, the first thing he would do would be to attack the nearest Hongchen Yixiao. Everyone could see that Hongchen Yixiao was very similar to Brother Yu. Although he knew a lot, his actual combat skills were limited. It was basically impossible for him to dodge Gu Fei's sword. There were too many variables in this deduction, and what happened proved that if Gu Xian hadn't appeared, it was hard to say if Gu Fei would have been able to kill Hongchen Yixiao. But no matter what, ambushing the Priest Academy was still the best choice among the resurrection points. First, Hongchen Yixiao had a very high chance of dying. Second, the team was formed because of him, so using him as bait was the best choice. Third, compared to the seasoned soldiers, he was the weakest and the easiest to bully. It would have been more convenient to ask for help from Gu Fei, but Gu Fei kept showing that he didn't need their help. Everyone was helpless, so they didn't inform him. To set up an ambush, knowing that the other party would come to the Priest Academy wasn't enough. They had to know where the other party would come from, so they needed to know where they would meet. So when Gu Fei came online, they asked where they would meet, but Gu Fei didn't tell them. They had no choice but to make other arrangements. They set up an ambush near the Priest Academy, waiting for Hongchen Yixiao's arrival. Hongchen Yixiao didn't disappoint them. Jian Nanyu and the other 6 were robbers, so they were experts in tracking. They followed him effortlessly. Everyone had originally planned to send Red Dust Smile back to the Priest Academy after finding out which tavern it was. However, as soon as they arrived at the White Foam Tavern, before they could even see Red Dust Smile enter, he was killed by a Grandmaster of Combat at the entrance with a few punches and kicks. Young Master Han once again saw Red Dust Smile in the Priest Academy. He thought that it was the doing of Blackwater, who was in charge of tracking him. However, when he asked around, he found out that there was another Qing Yaojin. Blackwater didn't know him, so he couldn't tell them where he came from. Everyone was at a loss. Therefore, the Priest Academy didn't act rashly. They let Hongchen Yixiao leave again, and Blackwater was ordered to find out what was going on. Blackwater was still hesitating if he should enter the tavern to take a look. In the end, he saw the Grandmaster of Combat enter the tavern. Blackwater also wanted to follow, but before he could reach the tavern, he saw the Grandmaster of Combat and Gu Fei coming out together. As a result, the 2 of them started fighting. Blackwater didn't know that these 2 were sparring. He just thought that it was another strong enemy. But why would this strong enemy attack Red Dust Smile? This matter confused everyone. The final person to solve the puzzle was Red Dust Smile's return. Gu Xian rushed over and scared Red Dust Smile away. Blackwater then saw Gu Fei and the Grandmaster of Combat chatting casually. Only then did he realize that the two of them were actually together. Blackwater looked at Gu Fei and the Grandmaster of Combat, and realized that the two of them were together. That expert Grandmaster of Combat is a friend of Thousand Miles. Blackwater quickly spread the news to everyone. Everyone who received the news looked at the Encyclopedia of Economics subconsciously. Isn't this person here? What kind of expert fighter friend was he? I remember. Doesn't he look like Qianli? Sword Demon suddenly realized and asked Blackwater. Now that you mention it, he does, Blackwater said. I know him. He's Qianli's cousin. Sword Demon said. Cousin? Everyone was confused. After a while, Unscathed in Battle mumbled. Qianli didn't need his friend's help this time. He brought his family? At the same time, Blackwater saw Gu Xian didn't attack Hongqian Yixiao at all. However, he still disappeared in white light. Obviously, he was teleported. Just when he told everyone the bad news, everyone saw Hongqian Yixiao resurrected for the third time in the Priest Academy. It didn't take Hongqian Yixiao a few seconds to teleport to the wanted mission office. He turned around and returned to the Priest Academy, which was faster than Blackwater's news. Everyone didn't understand why he suddenly died after teleporting. However, they finally understood the situation. After Han family young master gave the order to kill Yi Xiaowu, the impatient Yutian Shenming killed him within a few steps after Yi Xiaowu left the Priest Academy. Although there were many twists and turns, Yi Xiaowu finally walked the path in Han family young master's heart. Before this, Yi Xiaowu was killed 3 times in a row. It was really an unexpected gain. Although Shifeng knew that this person's threat didn't come from his level or equipment, the fact that he was able to trample on him like this was still a very satisfying thing to do. It was no wonder why Imperial Divine Cry was so happy. While Han family young master and the others were preparing, Blackwater mingled with the onlookers in the White Foam Tavern. He witnessed the veterans being surrounded and fined by the system guards. Meanwhile, Han family young master and the others waited for half an hour. If Blackwater didn't tell them the situation, they would have thought that something went wrong again. Then the battle between the veterans and Gu Fei and Gu Xian broke out. Blackwater made an even more intense live text broadcast. 5 archers and 2 thieves are coming to the Priest Academy from the White Foam Street. Yes, this is the way. This was the shortest way from the White Foam Tavern to the Priest Academy. Although the Han family's young master was not familiar with White Stone City, it was important not to forget that this was a tavern. This was the first place he would explore in any main city. At this time, he could find any tavern in White Stone City with his eyes closed. Qianli's electric wall is blocking them. They built a human ladder to climb up the wall so fast. Went up. The 5th one's belly is too big, he almost bounced off. Blackwater was very happy. 5 left, 2 were blocked by Qianli. This was the final result that Han family young master and the others were concerned about. This was the enemy they were going to face next. Can the remaining Qianli hold them back? Han family young master asked. The situation is in a stalemate, they are going to retreat. Damn, how did cousin Qianli run over there? At this time, Gu Xian suddenly sneaked behind the priest Old Wu and punched them to death on the wall. As a spectator, Blackwater didn't even notice how this guy sneaked past them. Then he punched another priest, went up to the roof, kicked people, fell another one to death, and killed another one with a 1,000-mile burst. The veterans were tossed around in circles. Just when Blackwater thought they were going to fight with all they had, they saw Gu Fei retreating to eat fruits to replenish his mana. None of them came up to chase him. They directly chose to retreat. Damn. Blackwater and the other spectators expressed their disdain towards the seemingly cowardly behavior of the veterans. They actually ran away. Damn, there are so many of them. 2 can't take care of them. A player beside Blackwater cursed. The mage went to eat fruits. He has no mana left. What a great opportunity. Another person said. Cowards. Blackwater also shouted. Everyone was exchanging their thoughts. Gu Fei had replenished a portion of his magic power. He had already seen the direction of the old soldiers. At this moment, he dashed forward, preparing to take a detour to intercept and kill another wave of them. It was the peak time of the game at night on a street outside the Priest Academy. Countless players were buying and selling things and going offline. This street was the only way for Broken Water and the others to get to the Priest Academy. Han family young master and the others had already taken their respective positions. 2 priests were killed by Qianli. Brother Yu, who was monitoring the Priest Academy through binoculars, talked to Yi Xiaowu when he saw the 2 priests. He vaguely felt that they were the veterans who fought in the morning. To be honest, they didn't have much of an impression of their appearance in the few minutes they fought in the morning. It was just that these people were older, which was rare in the online game which was dominated by young people. Looking at the 2 old faces, Brother Yu dared to make such a bold assertion. Very good, it's better for our plan without a priest. Han family young master said. Is everyone ready? No problem. Everyone answered. They've appeared. Sword Demon sent out the message. Everyone turned to look and saw 4 archers and a thief dashing towards them from the other end of the street. The leading player was Broken Water. The 5 of them moved at high speed, but their pace was the same. The distance between each other was always the same. This kind of tacit understanding was rare among the players. Get ready. Han family young master reminded again. Everyone was on standby. They didn't dare to underestimate these veterans. They only had one chance. If they missed, the situation would be hard to predict. No matter what, the veterans wouldn't have a problem retreating. Pay attention. As the 5 of them approached, Han family young master reminded again in the team channel. It was obvious that he was quite nervous. Countdown. Young Master Han gave the order, and everyone began to count silently in their hearts. However, if everyone's speed was listed out, they would realize that everyone had their own way of counting. Some counted 3, 2, 1, some counted 4, 3, 2, 1, and there were even some who counted 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Even though they were all counting 3, 2, 1, there seemed to be a difference in the speed of their counting. The only thing they had in common was that once they counted to 1, they would immediately jump out from the crowd and throw themselves at the 5 people beside them without a care for anything else. Broken Water and the others were shocked. Their first reaction was to fight back. However, just as their arrows were pointed at one person, more people jumped out. Han family young master started counting down at the same time. However, the way they counted was different, so there was a difference in who appeared first. Broken Water and the others had already released their first wave of attacks. However, the person they were pointing at had a shield in front of him. He didn't take the attack seriously at all. The second, third and fourth person rushed out. Their classes were different, their movement speed was different, and the time they appeared was also different. But the result was the same. At the same time, they all rushed towards Broken Water and the others. They didn't attack. The group of people only forcefully shrunk their circle. Within the circle, there were even other players who happened to be passing by. At this moment, they were also trapped within the circle. The group of people continuously closed in and squeezed. Broken Water and the others counterattacked, but they ignored them. They only opened their arms and formed a circle that no one could leave and no one could enter. Breakthrough at all costs. Broken Arrow, who had some experience in the game, suddenly realized what these people were trying to do. Unfortunately, it was too late. The Han family's young master and the others didn't even need to open their arms. They stood shoulder to shoulder in a circle. In the center of the circle were Broken Arrow's group of 5 and 2 passing players. The 2 of them were dumbstruck. They had no idea what was going on. Without hesitation, everyone's weapons were already flying towards the 5 people in the circle. A rogue encirclement. A compressed space, no dodging, no technique, only attack and be attacked. They were at a disadvantage in terms of numbers, equipment, and no cleric. If they fought recklessly, the chance of winning was 0. Even Broken Water, who had some gaming experience, couldn't think of a plan at this moment. He could only die unwillingly under the chaotic attacks of the group of people. The 5 people turned into white light one after another, but the group of people still stood in the same place without moving. It was really too exciting. The archers of the veterans had the greatest power. They had the ability to kill and move. The experts who had faced them face to face knew how scary these people were. They didn't expect to be wiped out by them in one go. Although they had more people and better equipment, in their hearts, they felt that they had completed a victory against a stronger opponent. After a while, someone finally said, "We did it." The group of people high-fived each other in celebration. The other two dumbfounded players in the circle gradually came back to their senses. They couldn't believe that such a fierce battle had just happened right next to them. And the two of them were actually unharmed. Looking at the group of people with rough fighting style celebrating their victory, the two suddenly felt their legs go soft and fell to the ground together. The next wave should be here soon. Unscathed in battle rubbed his palms together, full of confidence. Before this, he was still very nervous. Who knew that victory would be so easy? He couldn't help but feel high-spirited again. The arrogance of a top expert began to show again. "I'm afraid this will be hard to replicate again," Han family young master said. "Why?" Unscathed in battle obviously didn't have enough fun. "Because next time will be different. There will be warriors and grandmasters of combat in the enemy's formation. Moreover, they will be prepared," Han family young master said. Warriors were obviously very destructive to this kind of fighting style. Whether it was charge or whirlwind slash, they were the nemesis of encirclement tactics. And the grandmasters of combat's galloping meteor also had some impact. Body-hugging throw could tear a hole in the encirclement, and flying swallow slash could directly fly out of the circle. As for being prepared, of course, it was because the heroic water-breaking arrow, and the others would immediately inform the other comrades of the situation. If their warriors and grandmasters of combat encountered such a situation in a hurry, they wouldn't be able to react in time due to their lack of gaming experience. Now that they had enough time to think, if they still couldn't figure it out, would they still have the face to boast that they were experienced veterans? If water-breaking arrow passed the message to them, they might not even take this path. Jiananyu deduced. Did Blackwater target them? Han family young master asked. No. Jiananyu shook his head. He can't keep up with their speed and stealth. If he doesn't, I think the professional level of tracking and anti-tracking is not on the same level as us. There's no need to waste our efforts. Han family young master nodded. He agreed with Jiananyu's judgment. The veterans weren't Hongchen Yixiao. If they wanted to follow them, it would be suicide. Ask Brother Yu to see if he can observe them, Jiananyu suggested. Han family young master shook his head. He can't observe this direction from where he is. Then what should we do? Hurry up and say it. I'm so anxious. Unscathed in battle was annoyed. He didn't believe that Han family young master couldn't foresee this situation. However, this guy didn't say what to do and wanted to slowly discuss with Jiananyu. Just wait at the entrance of the priest college. They will come over eventually, Han family young master said. How are we going to fight? Unscathed in battle asked. There's no need to fight. Let's just watch the show, Han family young master said. What show? Do you think Qianli will let them go and not chase after them? Han family young master said. Ha! With Qianli's speed, he can probably go in front of them and intercept them again. How could he let go of such a chance? Han family young master said. I estimated that Qianli will eat some fruits to recover his mana. After that, he will need to take a longer route. With his speed, he should be able to intercept them. It should be near the entrance of the priest's college. We will ambush there and cooperate with Qianli to attack, Han family young master finally said. Will Qianli be willing? Unscathed in battle said. It's not up to him. Why? Didn't you notice that I said that in the mercenary channel? You idiot. Chapter 634. There was nothing Gu Fei could do at that moment. The Han family young master had indeed shouted those words in the channel, which was equivalent to a notice to Gu Fei. No matter how reluctant Gu Fei was, he had to help if the two sides were to fight. He could not just stand by and watch, right? Therefore, this was another bold speculation made by the Han family young master based on Gu Fei's personality. Other than unscathed in battle, no one asked any questions. Everyone immediately turned around and rushed back to the entrance of the priest academy. They knew that if they got too close, they might be seen by Yi Xiaowu and the others who were standing at the entrance. Therefore, when they were close enough, they found their own positions and pretended to blend in. In such a crowded place, this was extremely easy to do. They did not have to wait long. Although the second team had fought against Gu Fei and Gu Xian for a period of time, it was only a matter of seconds. The two teams could be said to have arrived one after the other. However, the second team could not match the speed of the first team, which was why they were so far behind. This was especially so when they received information about the water-breaking arrow on the way. Knowing that the opponent would have such a despicable ambush, the second team became even more cautious. Not only did they change their route, but they were also even more vigilant along the way. With their professionalism, there was really no one who could approach them with ulterior motives. Thus, the journey was peaceful. At that moment, the gate of the priest academy was right in front of them. They could already see Yi Xiaowu, Old Wu, and Little Chen behind the gate. The Han family young master, and the others also saw them. They held their breaths and waited for them to approach before taking action. At the same time, they looked around, wondering when Gu Fei would appear. However, the team suddenly stopped in their tracks and began to look around at a certain part of the street. Sniper God looked left, right, up, down, front, back, and forth. The team stopped there and quietly waited for him to look around. When Sniper God glanced at a certain spot, he saw a figure suddenly retreat behind a wall. Over there. Sniper God signaled with his finger. One of the thieves in the team immediately entered stealth and moved in that direction. The sudden halt of this group of people was already suspicious. Now that he saw that they were heading in the same direction, the Han family young master suddenly had an idea. He quickly sent a message to Yutian Shenming. Move quickly, they've found you. I know. Yutian Shenming wasn't dumb. When he had been peeking around the corner, he had seen Sniper God's gaze sweep past him. As expected of a sniper expert, they were now at the coordinates where Yi Xiaowu had been killed. The man looked around, and his eyes were all focused on the best spots for archers in the game to snipe. Yutian Shenming's position was one of them. When he saw the Sniper God's gaze, he knew that he had been discovered. Did these people purposely stop because they were bored and wanted to know the murderer's location? Yutian Shenming wasn't that naive. The moment he saw that something was wrong, he immediately turned and ran. When the Han family young master sent him the message, he had already left his original position. The veteran thief bravely went to the location that Sniper God had pointed out, but there was no trace of Yutian Shenming. Regretfully, he notified Sniper God. Sniper God was helpless. He knew that the enemy might have noticed his actions. Stopping at the same time might have caused too much of a commotion. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Sniper God knew that if the other party was able to set up such a perfect ambush, there would definitely be spies around. Even if the others continued to walk while he stayed behind to scout, he would not be able to escape their eyes. Especially since he was an archer and was much stronger than his comrades, the enemy might keep an eye on him. Sniper God accidentally became a little narcissistic. The team had no choice but to move forward to pick up Yi Xiaowu and the other two. With every step closer to the resurrection point, these people knew that they were getting closer to danger. This was the path they had to take. The success rate of setting up an ambush here was 100%. The Han family young master and his team knew this, as did the veterans. Sniper God's team, especially after learning from Water-Breaking Arrow about the Han family young master's encirclement method, made the necessary adjustments. Their team was spread out. There were only 10 of them, but they occupied multiple coordinates. With such a spread-out formation, it was impossible for young Master Han and the others to surround them in one go with the same amount of manpower. The veterans did not expect the skills of warriors and grandmasters of combat to be effective against such a shameless encirclement. However, their method of dispersing the team effectively prevented them from being wiped out at the same time. TSK, I didn't expect them to do this, sighed the Han family young master. Let's take them down one by one. suggested Unscathed in Battle. Take them down one by one. Look at where they're scattered. The entire street is within their perimeter. Ha! The Han family's young master even laughed for no reason. What are you laughing at? Unscathed in Battle was confused. Because I realized that you'll be the first to be discovered and taken down one by one. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and change your position. Stop pretending to be a salesman, said Han family young master. Zhan Wuxiang had learned this from Jian Nan and the others. He had set up a stall by the side of the road and pretended to be a peddler. At that moment he looked up. Indeed, someone from the Sniper God team had walked past the stall. When he slipped in front of him, how could he expect them not to recognize his common face? Zhan Wuxiang didn't harbor such hopes, because he felt that he was handsome and had an extraordinary aura. No matter who it was, they would definitely have a photographic memory. It was impossible for them to not recognize his aura that he couldn't hide even if they walked past him. Without any hesitation, he packed up the stall on the ground and returned to his original spot. Jian Nanyu, the three of you be careful too. The Han family young master continued to remind them. He knew exactly where everyone in the team was putting on an act. Jian Nan, Huo Runyi, and Dao Xiangmu were extremely daring. They pretended to be passers-by and wanted to pass through the formation of the Sniper Gods team and walk behind them. Han family young master saw that the three of them had changed their clothes and masks, but he wasn't sure if they wouldn't recognize them. Who knew if these soldiers had some kind of unique ability to read people? However, before Jian Nanyu's bold attempt could be tested, a black shadow suddenly flashed on the rooftop by the street. A fellow wearing a robe flew down with the wind blowing against him. The tip of his sword was pointed at the veteran who was walking along the street. Unscathed in Battle was pleasantly surprised. Gu Fei had appeared at the right time. I don't have to teleport anymore, right? The veteran's reflexes were quite sharp. When he noticed that the light above his head was different, he knew that someone had descended to attack him. As he raised his head, he retreated. However, a numb feeling spread throughout his body. A repulsive force pushed him forward uncontrollably. Just as he was about to fly up, he was slashed in the back. His health in the game dropped to the bottom. The poor veteran didn't even have the time to turn around before he was sent to the revival point. It's teleportation again. The veterans were extremely resentful towards this surreal skill. Can't you be more professional when you're jumping from the rooftop to ambush us? You even had to teleport halfway through your jump to appear behind your opponent. Who could dodge that? The above process sounded simple, but Gu Fei's jump, his teleportation during the jump, his landing position, his thunder palm, and his follow-up sword were all executed with unparalleled precision. The surreal concept of teleportation had now been successfully integrated into Gu Fei's Kung Fu. PK. The players on the street were in chaos when they saw that someone had been slashed to death. Especially when they saw that the killer was a mage, the players couldn't wait to avoid him. With a few AoE spells from this class, whoever was accidentally killed would have no way to explain it. Of course, there were players who were passionate about PK, and those who were passionate about watching the show. However, there were also quite a number of players who hated these people who caused trouble on the streets. Attacks in the parallel world were not immune to damage, regardless of whether they were from the same party or the same mercenary group. It was fine for PK in the wild, where they could do whatever they wanted. However, in the main city, there were players everywhere. During PK, innocent passers-by would often be involved. Mages' AoE spells, warriors' whirlwind slash, charge, and archers' arrows were the most unpopular skills for PK in the city. This was especially true in crowded areas. Suddenly, there would be some PK, which would annoy many players to death. The resurrection point was such a place. There was a large flow of people here, and many merchants were stationed there. However, it was also a high PK area. If you were being chased, you would have to run to the resurrection point, right? If you killed someone, you would have to wait for them at the resurrection point, right? Therefore, not only was PK common in this area, but it was also common for large-scale PK. Mages, warriors, and archers were the three most unpopular PK classes in this area. The skills of these three classes were blind, especially the mages and archers. Their skills were like spilled water. If the target dodged it, the passers-by would be hit in the head. Wasn't that just an injustice? Therefore, when someone saw a PK between the mages and shouted, the scene immediately became chaotic. The players packed up their stalls, ran away, east went east, west went west. In short, they all wanted to get as far away from Gu Fei as possible. This was the culture of the area. In places like taverns where there was gossip, once there was a fight, there would be a crowd of onlookers. At the resurrection point, as soon as there was a fight, people would flee in disgust. Of course, there were onlookers too, and they would all squeeze into the resurrection point. It was safe there, and there was a good show to watch. The veterans had just stepped onto the path of PvP in the game, so they didn't know much. The sudden chaos made them want to evacuate the players. Yi Xiaowu, Old Wu and Little Dong, who were standing at the entrance of the resurrection point, were instantly surrounded by rows of onlookers. The players in the resurrection point could not come into contact with each other, so naturally, they could not collide with each other. Although the three of them were weak classes, they could not be pushed away. The onlookers were envious of the three of them. "Brother, you're so fast. This is a good spot. Squat down. The one in front, squat down. Don't you know the rules?" Seeing that the three of them did not move for a long time, a veteran onlooker at the back started shouting. The three of them turned around in confusion. After confirming that they were being talked about, they looked at the people in the same row as them. Some were squatting, some were already sitting on the ground, and some had even taken out their snacks, eating while chatting happily with the unfamiliar players around them. It was always so easy to gossip. Although Yi Xiaowu was the chief planner of the game, he did not really understand the mental life of the players in the game. If it was any other time, he would find this scene quite interesting, but he was not in the mood at that moment. Due to the loud scolding from the players behind them, the three of them had no choice but to squat down. Comrade Little Chun showed great adaptability to the environment. He took out a bag of melon seeds from his pocket and handed it to the two of them. "Where did you buy it?" Old Wu asked curiously. "I saw someone selling it on the street in the afternoon. It was very cheap, so I bought some out of curiosity," Little Chun said. Old Wu grabbed a few and ate them. He shook his head and said, "It's not good." As a cookhouse soldier, he was still a little picky about his food. The melon seeds are still the best from Second Exchange Street. Someone at the side pointed out. The gossipy party knew everything and was very formidable. Gu Fei, the sniper god team, and the Han family young master were all attacked by the scattered PK players. How could they have the chance to make a move? However, everyone was staring at the target in front of them. Their weapons were already ready. They were just waiting for the players to scatter and then attack. Gu Fei was also very cunning. When he saw that the fight wouldn't start, he immediately walked to the foot of the wall and started eating fruits. After the chaos, the entire street was finally cleared. Both sides had no place to hide. The entire street was so clean that one could see the dust that was blown by the wind. "Yutian, can you find the priest academy?" Han family young master asked. "No problem." Yutian Shunming replied confidently. Han family young master heard this answer and knew that there was no hope. If there was no problem, the time should have been long ago. Who knew which street they were on now? "Sai, didn't you guys say that you don't need help?" Gu Fei had just met the Han family young master, so he naturally had to greet them. Jianan Yu and the others only smiled and did not reply. Han family young master was obviously very merciless. "Who's helping you?" "We're just repaying them for ambushing us this morning." "Then what are you waiting for? Let's begin," Sniper God shouted. The veterans all pulled their bows, and arrows flew everywhere. The spectators at the revival point felt that the seats at the revival point were really worth it. Were these guys purposely causing trouble? Regardless of the class, they were using bows. If they were to stand outside and watch, wouldn't they be killed by their arrows? Sniper God's team only had one archer. The attacks of the others were not a problem. Han family young master waved his staff and laughed coldly. "You're not learning any better. Do you think you can win this battle with your skills? Brother, do you know what replenishment is?" Sniper God's expression turned serious. He could not help but look at a certain direction. He saw 3 people sitting in the front row of the revival point eating sunflower seeds. He almost vomited blood. Han family young master's voice was very loud, so the 3 of them heard it too. They felt like they had woken up from a dream. The battle was happening right beside them. How could the 3 of them just sit there and watch? They had to go up and do their part. Especially without the 3 of them, there was not a single cleric in the veteran team. Actually, the 3 of them could not be blamed. Old Wu and Little Chun were not regular combat members. Old Wu was a cookhouse soldier stationed in the military base's canteen. Did he have to carry a pot with him during combat missions? It was obvious that he would not bring such a burden with him. Little Chun was the same. During some large-scale battles or drills, he would occasionally follow the team to perform some emergency care. For some special missions he wouldn't bring a medic with him. Sniper God and the others knew how to perform simple bandaging and nursing on their own. Therefore, the 2 of them did not have any sense of cooperation. Yi Xiaowu, on the other hand, was already numb after dying 4 times in a row. He was so focused on waiting for his comrades to rescue him that he did not realize that he should step forward to provide assistance. Looking at Sniper God and the others, he was still thinking, I'll be rescued in a few dozen meters. It was as if he was tied up at the revival point and could not get out unless someone came to release him. It was only when Han family young master shouted that the 3 of them finally reacted. They hurriedly pulled out their staffs and rushed out of the revival point to provide assistance. This was not a big deal. The moment the 3 of them took a few steps forward, there was a commotion among the spectators behind them. However, these spectators were of a higher quality than those in the tavern. Moreover, the battle had just begun, so they didn't have the time to immerse themselves in it. As a result, they didn't have any inclinations. The 3 clerics in front of them had only taken a few steps when 2 thieves appeared behind 2 of them. The large group of spectators didn't make a sound. Sniper God and the others shouted a reminder, but it was too late. The bandits who suddenly appeared behind them were naturally Sword Demon and Blackwater. Blackwater did not dare to follow Sniper God and the others, so he rushed over from another direction. As a bandit, he was faster than them. Although he took a longer detour, he returned to his position earlier. He and Sword Demon had been sneaking outside the Priest Academy. As soon as the 3 clerics came out, the 2 of them went up and stabbed them in the back. Now that they had mastered the tricks they needed to fight against the veterans, they could only be described in one word: rascals. The 2 clerics reacted immediately after being stabbed, and turned around to throw punches and kicks. Sword Demon and Blackwater did not care about that. One was punched in the nose, and the other was slashed in the neck. They pretended nothing had happened, and continued stabbing. The 2 clerics also wanted to dodge the attacks, but Sword Demon and Blackwater's disregard for their own life and death was too unreasonable. Even if ordinary people used this method, they would only use it when they were in extreme danger and had no choice but to die together. It was not like the players in the game who did not care about their lives from beginning to end. The 2 clerics kept dodging, but they could not avoid it completely. They were stabbed one after another, and they were almost finished in 2 or 3 moves. During this process, Yi Xiaowu wanted to heal himself, but just as he raised his staff and before he could chant, an arrow came from the west and he returned to the resurrection point. Spells could not be released in the resurrection point. Not to mention that Yi Xiaowu had been thrown behind a large group of onlookers when he resurrected. He could not even see what was happening outside. While he was feeling anxious, Old Wu and Little Chen accompanied him. Han family young master squinted at the 3 clerics being sent back to the camp. He turned around and smiled. Did you see the content? In this confrontation, we're not competing in tactics or techniques, we're competing in supplies. Do you know how Yuan Shao was defeated in the Battle of Guandu? I'm sorry, but your rations have been cut off. Chapter 635. Although it was a term used in ancient times, everyone knew what it meant. It made sense for the Han family's young master to treat the clerics as the logistics supply, even unscathed in battle, and the rest finally understood. It seemed like this was the main reason why Han family young master had set up an ambush in the Priest Academy. His goal was to lock the enemy's clerics in the resurrection point and cut off their connection. If it wasn't for the fact that Gu Fei had sent the 3 clerics to the resurrection point in advance, the Han family's young master would have tried to kill the 3 of them first. The enemy did not have an advantage in terms of damage output. Having 3 excellent clerics meant that they were undefeatable. Sniper God and the others had also witnessed the way Sword Ghost and Blackwater had brutally killed Old Wu and Little Chun. So far, other than the few people Gu Fei and Gu Xian had killed, the rest of the people had died in the same cruel way. The veterans were well aware of the pros and cons, but there was nothing they could do. The enemy would ignore everything and stick close to them. If this was in real life, they might be able to patiently dodge the attacks and exhaust the enemy's stamina. However, in the game, the only thing they could do was slowly exhaust their own HP. Therefore, the veterans could not think of any other way to avoid this method other than running away. Even Gu Fei sympathized with them. Gu Fei was not afraid of this method because of his insane damage output. If Gu Fei did not use his spells to slowly kill the enemy with the support of the clerics, it would be impossible for him to kill the enemy. With the support of the clerics, Gu Fei was not the only one who had thought of this. Sniper God and the rest had also realized the crux of the battle. Whether they could kill the Han family young master and the other 2 clerics first would determine the outcome of the battle. Sniper God suddenly made a hand gesture, and the peaceful confrontation was broken. Sniper God raised his sniper rifle and fired at the Han family young master. Old Thunder, Big Thunder, and the other 2 mages raised their arms and threw bullets. Mountain Axe and the other melee classes strode forward. They were prepared to take down the Han family young master in one fell swoop. The Han family young master sneered coldly. How could he not know the key to this duel? As he retreated, he cast healing spells. Circles of white light were cast on him. Sniper God Snipe, Old Thunder's spells, and the symbolic attacks from the crossbows of the people who were charging at him. All of them were blocked by the Han family young master. Dao Xiangmu and Lin Sun Sun really worshipped this fellow to death. Cleric spells were the same as mage's spells. It was ineffective to cast spells while moving. However, the Han family young master's control of the rhythm was too precise. Every time he took a step back, he would cast spells. It looked like he was moving and healing himself at the same time. Coupled with the golden ratio of his intelligence and spirit, his casting speed was extremely fast. None of the opponent's attacks could interrupt his healing. Unscathed in battle looked at him in a daze. He could not help but say, "Why are you still fighting? Are you going to hold on by yourself?" Sniper God and the others were secretly delighted when they saw the Han family young master's pretentious act. No matter how bad they were at the game, they knew that holding on like this would definitely consume a lot of mana. Once they ran out of mana, only death would await them. Even if they did not die, the cleric would need some time to replenish his mana. In this period of time, it would be equivalent to cutting off 1/3 of the opponent's supplies. Mountain Axe and the others thought about this as well. However, they were not satisfied with just exhausting the Han family young master's mana. Their goal was to kill the Han family young master on the spot. Seeing that the opponent's warriors and grandmasters of combat had also come to their rescue, Mountain Axe and the others roared and charged forward. "Wait, retreat." Mountain Axe, who was charging at the front, was confused. However, Sniper God, who was observing the whole situation from the back, could see it clearly. The other opponents suddenly charged forward as if they had just woken up from a dream. They reacted differently. Sniper God initially looked down on these people for not being comparable to professional soldiers. Their attacks were not orderly at all. However, as the opponents took a few steps forward, Sniper God realized that he was wrong. Very wrong. It was not that the opponents did not have order. This chaos was their order. They had different activation times according to each person's attributes. At first, it seemed like a mess. However, in the end, these people were in position at the same time and surrounded Mountain Axe and the others. Mountain Axe and the others were trapped. When they saw the opponents charging forward, they felt that they would be able to catch up to the Han family young master in a few steps. They did not want to let go of such a great opportunity. Hearing Sniper God shout, they subconsciously looked around. The opponents that had charged out were getting closer to them. Only then did they feel that something was wrong. Han family young master continued to retreat while smiling. I'm sorry, it's too late. Zhan Wuxiang and the others who rushed out did not recklessly charge forward like they did when they surrounded Water Arrow and the others. This team's opponents were different. There were warriors and grandmasters of combat. If they rushed forward recklessly, their formation might be disrupted by their opponents. They kept some distance. Whether it was whirlwind slash or charge, unscathed in battle, and Nanyu would have the time and space to use the same skills. This way, the collision would be decided by the system. The two experts with good equipment and high attack would definitely have the upper hand. Mountain Axe and the others had Water Arrow's warning. At this time, they thought that the opponents would rush forward and crush them to death. These people were combat experts. They knew that they were different from Water Arrow and the other archers. They had class-specific skills and had ways to break out of this kind of encirclement, so they were prepared. However, they did not expect this group of people to not rush forward. Instead, they were hesitating whether to surround them or not. Fire wheel from the sky. At this time, a red light flashed in the sky. The burning fire wheel came crashing down. Mountain Axe and the others wanted to dodge, but they finally realized their opponent's goal. Although this seemingly encirclement of theirs couldn't cause any harm to them, it was just enough to seal off their movements. Mountain Axe and the others wanted to rush forward, but normal methods were useless. Their opponent could ignore their normal attacks. If they threw a punch, their opponent would just block with their face and hug them with both hands. The two warriors next to Mountain Axe recalled their sacrifice in the morning and felt a chill run down their spines. They subconsciously chose not to attack unscathed in battle and Nanyu, who were of the same class. They used charge at the same time, but this time, it was Fiery Jacket who was casting a spell. This person was a mage, so he had no strength. Even if he got close, he would not be caught. Moreover, he could also stop him from attacking. The two warriors calculated in their minds and felt that their decision was very wise. When Fiery Jacket saw the two warriors charging at him, he actually glanced at the Han family young master. He really hit the mark. Fiery Jacket was surprised. He waved his staff and a fire beacon city suddenly appeared in front of him. The two warriors were in front of him and were startled to see the sudden wall of fire. At this moment, the only way to stop was to cancel the skill. This was a real game. Many players in the game couldn't do it properly, let alone two uncles who had just joined the game. The two warriors didn't think about this at all. As a result, they passed through the wall of fire together and charged at Fiery Jacket. Fiery Jacket flew away, but at the same time, he was bathed in white light. The two warriors were on fire, but no one paid attention to them. Fiery Jacket's equipment was not bad. The two warriors' charge was not enough to instantly kill him. On the other hand, the two warriors had normal equipment, so they were burned by the wall of fire. More importantly, no one could heal them, so they had to continue fighting with their remaining health. It was very pitiful. When the two warriors suddenly charged at Fiery Jacket, Unscathed in Battle's group suddenly closed the encirclement with large strides. 100 Era's Grandmaster got up from where he fell and charged toward the mountain splitting axe like a meteor. If it was a normal character, Mountain Axe might be able to defeat him in 2 or 3 moves, but 100 Lives Classics was not so easy to deal with. As soon as he came up to challenge him, the two of them immediately started fighting fiercely. Although Gu Xian left a deep psychological scar in Mountain Axe's heart, as a professional soldier, his mental fortitude was strong. Even if he knew he was no match for Gu Xian, he was not afraid. It was just that his previous confidence was gone, and he fought more carefully. The other Grandmaster of Combat became the focus of Unscathed in Battle's group. As expected, the Grandmaster of Combat's skill was also very effective in breaking encirclement. When a group of people went up, one of them was immediately thrown away. Unfortunately, there were 6 people on this side. Unscathed in Battle, Ken and Yuki, Brother Yu, Unrivaled Lucky Star, Inakagami and Lin Sunsen. If one person was surrounded, there would be a substitute. When one person was thrown away, another would replace him. The pitiful Grandmaster of Combat was unable to escape. He wanted to use Flying Swallow Slash to jump out of the encirclement, but as soon as he jumped, the encirclement of the experts changed. In the end, it was like jumping out of a computer room, jumping from one grid to another, followed by a series of punches and kicks. It was very depressing. Grandmasters of Combat were not a class with high health. After throwing a few people and jumping a few circles, he tragically became the first person to die. Other than these 2 warriors and 2 Grandmasters of Combat, there was also a thief and 2 knights who rushed over to capture Han family young master. They were not idle either. Their opponent was the most terrifying Gu Fei. The 3 of them were not too far behind Mountain Axe in terms of punches and kicks. At this moment, they were all holding daggers and fighting Gu Fei. Although knights could use swords, they had never practiced sword techniques before. They really did not know how to use a sword effectively, so they might as well use daggers, which they were more familiar with. Battles were happening everywhere on the street. However, the battles here were more interesting. The 3 of them worked well together, advancing and retreating in an orderly manner. If it was just one person, Gu Fei could take him down very quickly. However, facing 3 at the same time, he really could not end the battle quickly. Han family young master was a little angry as he watched. He could not help but yell, "What are you dodging? If you get hit, I will heal you." Gu Fei and the others were also fighting in a more orderly manner, which made the 3 old soldiers very happy. When they stabbed out with their daggers, no matter where they attacked, the opponent would dodge and look for an opening to counterattack. If it were the 2 rough warriors over there, this stab would be for nothing. The opponent would not care whether you stabbed the heart or the liver. Wouldn't it be infuriating? At this moment, Han family young master reminded loudly, but he wanted Gu Fei to be a little more shameless. He could see that sometimes, because Gu Fei had no choice but to dodge some of the opponent's attacks, he would change his body shape and change the direction of his sword that was supposed to hit the opponent. If it was up to him, then he would stab. His own healing spell was the same as not stabbing. Gu Fei's sword would stick to the opponent's body, and after a chant, the world would become quiet. In the end, Gu Fei ignored him and continued to spar with the others. Han family young master rolled his eyes and cursed, "Idiot! Trash!" Hearing this, the others blushed with shame. If they were all trash, then what were they? Microorganisms? In the blink of an eye, the situation had become like this. The 2 warriors who passed through Fire Beacon City dragged their wounded bodies and wanted to chase after Flaming Cloak, but Flaming Cloak did not have Gu Fei's skill. Relying on the fact that he had a priest, Flaming Wheel from the sky and 1,000 layers of flames came straight for him. The old soldiers were too focused on fighting in close combat, and completely forgot that mages could also use this shameless method. As a result, the 2 of them died under Flaming Cloak's destructive attack. These 2 were also very tragic. They died 3 times in one day, which was quite an achievement for normal players. Unscathed in Battle's group of 6 killed a Grandmaster of Combat together, which was quite amazing. At this moment, they saw that the 100-era strategist didn't need their help against the mountain-splitting axe. Although Gu Fei was fighting 1 against 3, he wasn't at a disadvantage. This person had just been scolded by the Han family's young master as an idiot trash, so it was very likely that his emotions were unstable. If they went up to help, he would use his dual flame flash that spun in circles, and everyone was accidentally grazed by it. It would be disastrous. They couldn't go up. In the end, the 6 of them charged at Sniper God's group with great momentum. Sniper God was very depressed at this moment. He had planned for him and Old Thunder to hold down the Han family young master, while the other 7 went up to capture him. How could he have known that he would fall into the opponent's trap? The other party knew better than him what the key to victory in this battle was, and had simply used the young master of the Han family as bait. Mountain Axe and the others' charge had been countered by the other party, and it was obvious that this had been planned in advance. Flaming Cloak killed 2 warriors alone, while Unscathed in Battle's group of 6 only killed 1 Grandmaster of Combat. This was the result of their strategy. Sniper God's group had a total of 10 people, and 3 of them had died. Gu Fei's group of 3 would have died if he had not been unwilling to fight shamelessly. This was also because Gu Fei saw that the situation was under his control, and that his side was not in any danger at all. If there really was a crisis, he would not have been so stubborn and refused to play like a hoodlum. Now that the situation was set, even if it was just a commercial break, it would not be a big deal for him to arrange it. Yi Xiaowu and the other two who were at the resurrection point could no longer see the battle outside from the rear. However, the spectators also knew the severity of the situation. They knew that the three of them were related to the battle outside, so they made way for the three of them to leave. But outside the priest college, Glue was waiting for the three of them with a bow drawn. Sword Demon and Blackwater were not in the battle, so there was no doubt that they had snuck to the academy's entrance. If the three of them went out, the result would be a repeat of the last time. The three of them hoped that Sniper God and the others would rush to the academy's entrance so that they could rescue them. This was actually another way for Sniper God and the others to find a chance to win. Since the key to victory was the cleric, they could either kill the opposing cleric or save their own cleric. Unfortunately, Sniper God and the others failed to do either. After the three of them died, 100 Lives Statecraft used the forbidden skill, Fire Dragon Fist, to force out Mountain Axe's psychological trauma. This Kung Fu kid, who was still very honest and sincere in the morning, was now attacking abnormally ruthlessly. Just as Gu Fei had said, splitting Mountain Axe's combat attainments were inferior to 100 Generation Statecrafts. It was only by relying on his imposing manner that he was able to defeat a stronger opponent. Now the psychological burden was getting heavier and heavier, and his imposing manner was getting lower and lower. On the other hand, the 100 Generation Statecraft was getting smoother and smoother, while splitting Mountain Axe was suffering unspeakably. On the other hand, Gu Fei was fighting 1 against 3, and he gradually found a chance to win. This was because the three veterans were not used to it. When they fought on the battlefield, life and death were decided in an instant. It was rare for them to fight for such a long time. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was different. They were competing in martial arts. Because they didn't use any killing moves, and because the purpose of the competition was to learn from each other, they weren't in a hurry to decide the winner. They would exchange punches and kicks, and it was common for them to suddenly stop to chat. When they were tired, they would stop to drink tea and eat some snacks. After resting enough, they would continue. In this way, as long as there was no problem with their physical strength, it was possible for them to fight for a whole day. This different situation led to the current situation. The three of them were shouting and fighting, but after so long, they could not even touch the opponent's side. This was something they had never heard of before. As they fought, their emotions gradually became unstable. Their emotions affected their judgment, and some of their attacks were slightly off. In the eyes of an expert like Gu Fei, it was a loophole. He took advantage of this loophole and swung his sword. When the enemy was hit, chanting would follow. Fire, lightning, and everything else that could be used would be used to kill one enemy. Sniper God and Old Thunder were all long-range attackers, while Unscathed in Battle and the others were all short-range attackers. They had the ability to kite around, but the other side had clerics to support them, so it was a waste of time. Sniper God already had the intention to retreat. He ordered 2 people to attack Gu Fei and 100 Realms Jingluan, hoping to save his brothers. In the end, their intentions were seen through. Unscathed in Battle, and the others simply ignored the 3 of them and turned back to torment the rest. They surrounded them and killed them all. Gu Fei sighed as he held his sword. He hadn't had enough fun yet. Sniper God saw that this was a huge defeat, and there was nothing left for the 3 of them to do. Water-breaking Arrow received the message and suggested that they retreat. The 3 of them had no choice but to leave. Sniper God's archer had the advantage of movement, so he was not afraid. However, although Old Thunder had added agility, he could not compare to Gu Fei. Even 100 Realms Jingluan's agility was on par with theirs. These 2 people were going to be troublesome. However, Sniper God knew that Water-breaking Arrow and the others had already rushed over from the revival point. As long as he joined up with their group, covering their retreat should not be a problem. Sniper God ran with the 2 sorcerers, and Unscathed in Battle, and the others had already given up on chasing them. Gu Fei, on the other hand, did not move. He did not have much resentment for the veterans. Chasing them from the tavern was enough, so he did not want to keep chasing them. 100 Realms Jingluan was the only one who jumped out to chase them. After a few steps, he turned around and saw that he was the only one who had moved. He was confused and immediately stopped. Chapter 636. Although it was a term used in ancient times, everyone knew what it meant. It made sense for the Han family's young master to treat the clerics as the logistics supply, even unscathed in battle, and the rest finally understood. It seemed like this was the main reason why Han family young master had set up an ambush in the priest academy. His goal was to lock the enemy's clerics in the resurrection point and cut off their connection. If Gu Fei had not sent the 3 clerics to the resurrection point in advance, Han family young master would have tried to kill the 3 of them at all costs. The enemy did not have an advantage in terms of damage output. Having 3 excellent clerics meant that they were invincible. Sniper God and the others had also witnessed the way Sword Ghost and Blackwater had brutally killed Old Wu and Little Chun. So far, other than the few people Gu Fei and Gu Xian had killed, the rest of the people had died in the same cruel way. The veterans were well aware of the pros and cons, but there was nothing they could do. The enemy would ignore everything and stick close to them. If this was in real life, they might be able to patiently dodge the attacks and wear down the enemy's stamina. However, in the game, they would only wear down their own HP. Therefore, the veterans could not think of any other way to avoid this method other than turning around and running. Even Gu Fei sympathized with them. Gu Fei was not afraid of this method because of his insane damage output. If Gu Fei did not use his spells to slowly kill the enemy, he would not be able to kill the enemy with the support of the clerics. With the support of the clerics, Gu Fei was not the only one who had thought of this. Sniper God and the rest had also realized the crux of the battle. Whether they could kill the Han family young master and the other 2 clerics first would determine the outcome of the battle. Sniper God suddenly made a hand gesture, and the peaceful confrontation was broken. Sniper God raised his hand and fired a shot at the Han family young master. Old Thunder and the other 2 sorcerers threw their grenades. Mountain Axe and the rest of the melee classes strode forward. They were prepared to take down the Han family young master in one fell swoop. The young master of the Han clan laughed coldly. How could he not know where the key to this battle lay? As he retreated, he cast healing spells. Circles of white light were cast on his body. Sniper God Snipe, Old Lay's magic, and the symbolic attacks from the crossbows of the people charging at him. Young Master Han was able to withstand all of them. Dao Xiangmu and Lin Sunsen were in awe of this guy. The spells of the clerics were the same as the spells of the sorcerers. Casting spells while moving was ineffective. However, the Han family young master's control of the rhythm was too precise. He would cast spells every time he took a step back. It looked like he was healing himself as he moved. Coupled with the golden ratio of intelligence and spirit, his casting speed was extremely fast. None of the opponent's attacks could interrupt his healing. Unscathed in battle looked at him in a daze. He could not help but say, "What's the point of fighting? Are you going to hold on by yourself?" Sniper God and the rest were secretly delighted when they saw the Han family young masters acting tough. No matter how bad they were at the game, they knew that holding on like this would consume a lot of mana. If they ran out of mana, they would be dead. Even if they did not die, the cleric would need some time to replenish his mana. In this period of time, it would be equivalent to cutting off 1/3 of the opponent's supplies. Mountain Axe and the rest were also thinking about this. However, they were not satisfied with just exhausting the Han family young master's mana. Their goal was to kill the Han family young master on the spot. Seeing that the opponent's warriors and grandmasters of combat had come to their rescue, Mountain Axe and the rest roared and charged forward. "Wait, retreat." Mountain Axe, who was charging at the front, was confused. However, Sniper God, who was observing the whole situation from the back, could see it clearly. The rest of the opponents suddenly charged forward as if they had just woken up from a dream. Their reactions were different. Sniper God initially looked down on them. They were not as good as professional soldiers. Their attacks were not orderly at all. However, as the opponent took a few steps forward, Sniper God realized that he was wrong. He was very wrong. It was not that the opponent did not have order. This chaos was their order. They had different activation times according to each person's attributes. At first, it seemed like a mess. However, in the end, these people were in position at the same time and surrounded Mountain Axe and the rest. Mountain Axe and the rest were trapped. When they saw the opponent rushing forward, they felt that they would be able to catch up to the Han family young master in a few steps. They did not want to let go of such a great opportunity. When they heard Sniper Gods shout, they subconsciously focused on their surroundings. The enemy that had rushed out had gotten closer to them. Only then did they feel that something was wrong. Han family young master continued to retreat and smiled. Sorry, it's too late. Unscathed in battle, and the rest did not rush forward recklessly like they did when they surrounded Water Arrow and the rest. This team was different. There were warriors and grandmasters of combat. If they rushed forward recklessly, their formation might be disrupted. They kept some distance. Whether the opponent's warriors used Whirlwind Slash or Charge, Unscathed in battle and Southern Azure Sword would have the time and space to use the same skills. This way, the collision would be decided by the system. The two experts with good equipment and high attack would definitely have the upper hand. Mountain Axe and the rest had Water Arrow's warning. At this time, they thought that the opponent would rush forward and crush them to death. These people were combat experts. They knew that they were different from Water Arrow and the other archers. They had class-specific skills and had ways to break out of this kind of encirclement. Therefore, they were prepared. However, they did not expect this group of people to not rush forward. Instead, they were hesitant about whether to surround them or not. Fire wheel from the sky. At this time, a red light flashed in the sky. The burning fire wheel came crashing down. Mountain Axe and the rest wanted to dodge, but they finally realized their opponent's goal. Although this seemingly encirclement of theirs couldn't cause any harm to them, it was just enough to seal off their movements. Mountain Axe and the rest wanted to rush forward, but normal methods were useless. Their opponent could ignore their normal attacks. If they threw a punch, their opponent would just block with their face and hug them with both hands. The two warriors next to Mountain Axe recalled their sacrifice in the morning and shuddered. They subconsciously chose not to attack Unscathed in battle and Southern Azure Sword. The two of them used Charge at the same time, but this time, it was Fiery Jacket who was casting a spell. This person was a mage and had no strength. Even if he got close, he would not be caught. Moreover, he could also stop him from attacking. The two warriors calculated in their minds and felt that their decision was very wise. When Fiery Jacket saw the two warriors charging at him, he actually glanced at the Han family young master. He was right. Fiery Jacket was astonished. He waved his staff and a fire beacon city suddenly appeared in front of him. The two warriors were in front of him and were startled to see the sudden wall of fire. At this moment, the only way to stop was to cancel the skill. This was a real game. Many players in the game couldn't do it properly, let alone two uncles who had just joined the game. The two warriors didn't think about this at all. As a result, they passed through the wall of fire together and charged at Fiery Jacket. Fiery Jacket flew away, but he was also bathed in white light. The two warriors were on fire, but no one paid attention to them. Fiery Jacket's equipment was not bad. The two warriors' charge was not enough to instantly kill him. The two warriors, on the other hand, had ordinary equipment. They were wearing flaming cloaks, so they were burned by the fire walls. More importantly, no one healed them. They had to continue fighting with their dying health. It was very pitiful. Just as the two warriors suddenly charged at the flaming robe, Zhan Wuxiang and the others suddenly took large strides and shrank the encirclement. 100 Era's Grandmaster got up from where he fell and charged toward the mountain-splitting axe like a meteor. If it was a normal character, Mountain Axe might be able to defeat him in 2 or 3 moves, but 100 Years Classic wasn't so easy to deal with. As soon as he came up to challenge him, the two of them immediately started fighting fiercely. Although Gu Xian left a deep psychological scar in Mountain Axe's heart, as a professional soldier, his mental fortitude was very strong. Even if he knew he wasn't a match, he wasn't afraid. It was just that the extremely confident aura from before was gone, and he fought more cautiously. The other Grandmaster of Combat became the focus of Unscathed in Battle's group. As expected, The Grandmaster of Combat skill was also very effective in breaking out of encirclement. A group of people was immediately thrown away. Unfortunately, there were 6 people here. Unscathed in battle, Ken and Yuki, Brother Yu, Unrivaled Lucky Star, Inakagami, and Lin Sunsen. If one person was surrounded, there would be a substitute. If one person was thrown away, another would replace him. The pitiful Grandmaster of Combat couldn't escape. He wanted to use Flying Swallow Slash to jump out of the encirclement, but as soon as he jumped, the encirclement of the experts changed. In the end, it was like jumping into a computer room, jumping from one grid to another. Then a series of punches and kicks followed. It was very depressing. Grandmasters of Combat weren't classes with high health. After throwing a few people and jumping a few circles, he tragically became the first person to die. Other than these 2 warriors and 2 Grandmasters of Combat, there was also a thief and 2 knights who rushed over to capture Han family young master. They weren't idle either. Their opponent was the most terrifying Gu Fei. The 3 of them weren't too far behind Mountain Axe in terms of punches and kicks. At this moment, they were all holding daggers and fighting with Gu Fei. Although knights could use swords, they had never practiced swordsmanship before. They didn't know how to use a sword effectively, so they might as well use daggers, which they were more familiar with. Battles were happening everywhere on the street, but the battles here were more interesting. The 3 of them had good teamwork, advancing and retreating in an orderly manner. If it was just one person, Gu Fei could take him down quickly. However, facing 3 at the same time, he really couldn't end the battle quickly. Han family young master was a little angry as he watched. He couldn't help but yell, "What are you dodging? If you get hit, I'll heal you." Gu Fei and the others were also fighting in a more orderly manner, which made the 3 old soldiers very happy. When they stabbed out with their daggers, no matter where they attacked, the opponent would dodge and look for an opening to counterattack. If it were the 2 rough warriors over there, this stab would be for nothing. The opponent wouldn't care if you stabbed the heart or the liver. Wouldn't that be infuriating? At this moment, Han family young master reminded Gu Fei loudly, but he wanted Gu Fei to be a little more shameless. He could see that sometimes, because Gu Fei had to dodge some of the opponent's attacks, he had to change his position and change the direction of his sword that was supposed to hit the opponent. If it was up to him, then he would just stab. His own healing spell was the same as not stabbing. Gu Fei's sword stuck to the opponent's body and he chanted. The world became quiet again. In the end, Gu Fei ignored him and continued to spar with the others. Han family young master rolled his eyes and cursed, "Idiot! Trash!" Hearing this, the others blushed with shame. If they were all trash, then what were they? Microorganisms? The results exploded in several places at the same time. In the blink of an eye, the situation had become like this. The 2 warriors who passed through Fire Beacon City dragged their wounded bodies and wanted to chase after Flaming Cloak. However, Flaming Cloak didn't have the same quality as Gu Fei. Relying on the fact that he had a priest, Flaming Wheel from the sky and 1,000 layers of flames came straight for him. The old soldiers were too focused on fighting in close combat, and completely forgot that mages could also use this shameless method. As a result, the 2 of them died under Flaming Cloak's destructive attack. These 2 players were also very tragic. They had died 3 times today, which was quite an achievement for ordinary players. Unscathed in Battle's group of 6 worked together to kill a Grandmaster of Combat, which was quite miraculous. At this moment, Bai Yanjing didn't need their help against the mountain-splitting axe. Although Gu Fei was fighting 1 against 3, he wasn't at a disadvantage. This person had just been scolded by the Han family's young master as idiot trash, so it was very likely that his emotions were unstable. If he were to go up to help, he would burst out with his dual flame flash that was spinning in circles, and everyone was accidentally grazed by it. It would be disastrous. In the end, the 6 of them charged at Sniper God's group with great momentum. Sniper God was very depressed. He had planned for himself and Old Thunder to hold down the Han family young master, while the other 7 went up to capture him. How could he have known that he would fall into the opponent's trap? The opponent knew better than him what the outcome of this battle was, so they used the Han family young master as bait. Mountain Axe and the other's attack was countered by the opponent. It was obvious that this was planned beforehand. Flaming Cloak killed 2 warriors alone, while Unscathed in Battle's group of 6 only managed to kill 1 Grandmaster of Combat. This was the result of their strategy. Sniper God's group had a total of 10 people, and 3 of them had already died. If not for Gu Fei's refusal to fight shamelessly, the other 3 would have died as well. This was also because Gu Fei saw that the situation was under his control, and that his side was not in any danger at all. If there really was a crisis, he would not have been so stubborn and refused to play like a hoodlum. Now that the situation was set, even if it was just a commercial break, it would not be a big deal for him to arrange it. Yi Xiaowu and the other 2, who were at the resurrection point, could no longer see the battle outside from the rear. However, the spectators also knew the severity of the situation. They knew that the 3 of them were related to the battle outside, so they made way for the 3 of them to leave. But outside the priest college, Glue was waiting for the 3 of them with a bow drawn. Sword Demon and Blackwater were not in the battle, so there was no doubt that they had snuck to the academy's entrance. The 3 of them would only repeat the previous outcome if they went out. The 3 of them hoped that Sniper God and the others would rush to the academy's entrance, so that they could rescue them. This was actually another way for Sniper God and the others to find a way to win. Since the key to victory was the clerics, they had to either kill the opposing clerics or save their own clerics. Unfortunately, Sniper God and the others failed to do either. After the 3 of them died, Split Mountain Axe's psychological trauma was forced out by 100 Live Statecraft's Fire Dragon Fist. This Kung Fu kid, who was still very honest and sincere in the morning, was now attacking abnormally ruthlessly. Just as Gu Fei had said, Splitting Mountain Axe's combat attainments were inferior to 100 Generation Statecrafts. It was only by relying on his imposing manner that he was able to defeat a stronger opponent. Now the psychological burden was getting heavier and heavier, and his imposing manner was getting lower and lower. On the other hand, the 100 Generation Statecraft was getting smoother and smoother, while Splitting Mountain Axe was suffering unspeakably. On the other hand, Gu Fei was fighting 1 against 3, and he was gradually gaining the upper hand. This was due to the 3 veterans not being used to it. When they fought on the battlefield, life and death were decided in an instant. It was rare for them to fight for such a long time. Gu Fei, on the other hand, was different. They were competing in martial arts. Because they didn't use any killing moves, and because the purpose was to learn from each other, they wouldn't be in a hurry to decide the winner. They would exchange punches and kicks, and it was common for them to suddenly stop to chat. When they were tired, they would stop to drink tea and eat some snacks. After resting enough, they would continue. In this way, as long as there was no problem with their physical strength, it was possible for them to fight for a whole day. This different situation had led to the current situation. The 3 of them had been shouting and fighting for so long, but they had not even touched the opponent's side. This was unheard of for the 3 of them. As they fought, their emotions gradually became unstable. Their emotions affected their judgment, and some of their attacks were slightly off. In the eyes of an expert like Gu Fei, it was a loophole. He took advantage of this loophole and stabbed it with his sword. When the enemy was hit, chanting would follow. Fire, lightning, and whatever else that could be used would be used to kill one of them. Sniper God and Old Thunder were all long-range attackers, while Unscathed in Battle and the others were all short-range attackers. Sniper God and Old Thunder had the capital to kite them, but Unscathed in Battle and the others had the support of a cleric, so it was a waste of time. Sniper God already had the intention to retreat, so he ordered 2 people to attack Gu Fei and Split Mountain Axe, hoping to rescue his brothers. In the end, their intentions were seen through. Unscathed in Battle, and the others simply ignored the 3 of them, and went back to torment the rest. They surrounded them and killed them all. Gu Fei sighed as he held his sword. He hadn't had enough fun yet. Sniper God saw that this was a huge defeat, and there was nothing left for the 3 of them to do. Water-breaking Arrow received the message and suggested that they retreat, so the 3 of them prepared to leave helplessly. Sniper God's archer had the advantage of movement, so he was not afraid. However, although Old Thunder had added agility, he could not compare to Gu Fei. Even Split Mountain Axe's agility was on par with them. These two people were going to be troublesome. However, Sniper God knew that water-breaking arrow, and the others had already rushed over from the revival point. As long as he joined up with their group, covering their retreat should not be a problem. Sniper God ran with the two sorcerers, and the short-range attackers like unscathed in battle, and the others had already given up on chasing them. Gu Fei, on the other hand, did not move at all. He did not have much resentment for the veterans. Chasing them from the tavern was enough, so he did not want to keep chasing them. Split Mountain Axe was the only one who jumped out to chase after them. After a few steps, he turned around and saw that he was the only one who had moved. He was confused and immediately stopped. Chapter 637. The veterans were agile, and they were even more adept at climbing ropes than Gu Fei. Gu Fei did not have the time to admire the first veteran's miserable fall. He immediately went to cut the second rope, hoping to break it before the other four veterans hit the ground. He did it. 1, 2, 3, 4. The four ropes were not far from each other. As Gu Fei dragged his dagger across the ground, the ropes were broken one by one. Screams came one after another, but the fourth veteran did not move much. Gu Fei had been looking down the whole time. When he cut the fourth rope, the veteran was already close to the ground. Since he was mentally prepared, he held on to the broken rope and landed steadily. The other three veterans fell flat on their backs, and the players in the safe zone burst into laughter. However, the four of them quickly stood up and patted the dust off their butts. They were fine. In the safe zone, they wouldn't die no matter what. It was simply too safe. The fifth rope was empty. A total of 9 veterans had reached the safe zone. 5 of them went down first, so Gu Fei only had 4 of them left. Therefore, Gu Fei did not cut the 5th rope. He dragged the empty rope up and confiscated it. Among the 9 of them, the 2 magicians are not among them. Brother Yu said after careful observation. Excluding Yi Xiaowu, there were 19 veterans in total. There were 5 archers, 3 grandmasters of combat, 3 rogues, and 2 each of the other classes. This was the number that Brother Yu had calculated during the battle this morning. There were 5 archers outside the door, 2 priests in the safe zone, and 9 people who came down from the roof. There were 16 veterans in total. 3 of them were missing, including the 2 magicians who had turned into the alley on the right, and 1. Brother Yu did not see the rogue. Thief! Everyone shivered. Could it be that he had already gotten close to them? Understanding the organization's intention, the flaming cloak suddenly fired 2 spells at them. There was no rogue. It seemed like he was not close to them yet. The 4 veterans were hoping that Gu Fei would kill them by cutting their ropes. However, the safe zone was the real deal. It seemed like they would not die no matter what they did. Even so, the 4 of them felt very embarrassed, especially the 3 who had fallen awkwardly. After they got up, they stared at Gu Fei, who was above them, and wanted to rush up and fight with their lives. In the end, they saw Gu Fei calmly confiscate their 5th rope. Everyone looked at the Han family young master. Gu Fei's appearance was nothing more than a comical show for the crowd. Due to the safety zone, the veterans who had cut their ropes did not suffer any damage. Instead, they landed even faster. The archers were outside, and the melee fighters were inside. They could easily cover the 3 priests as they fought their way out. The Child Elite Group's previous victory was due to the fact that their opponents did not have any priests. This time, however, the situation was completely different. It was difficult to defend against a pincer attack from both inside and outside. On the rooftop, Gu Fei felt it was a pity that the 4 of them did not fall to their deaths. However, after destroying all 5 ropes, he felt that he had accomplished something. Facing the guys below, he shouted, "All right, I've cut off their escape route. It's up to you guys now." Everyone's faces darkened. Was that the key to the problem? Now that the enemies were coming at them from the front, was there a need to escape by climbing the ropes? Without giving them too much time to think, the veterans at the resurrection point had gathered. The 3 priests, Yi Xiaowu, Old Wu and Little Chen, also joined the team. Old Wu and Little Chen realized their importance. This time, they did not take out their crossbows to fight. Like Yi Xiaowu, They took out their priest staff and prepared to focus on their logistics. The other 9 people formed an angle of about 60 to 70 degrees with the mountain-splitting axe as the center. Each of them was less than a meter away from each other. The 3 priests were sandwiched in the middle. After setting up the formation, the group immediately charged at the people guarding the door. Fight! Unscathed in battle drew his sword and shouted. No one responded. The Han family young master and the sword demon were calm people. They would not make such a rash decision. Jian Nanyu and the others had strong teamwork. They would not make such a careless declaration. After Unscathed in battle shouted, Yutian Shenming was eager to respond. However, Yutian Shenming was an archer. His fighting style was completely different from that of Unscathed in battle's warrior. Unscathed in battle fought. He drew his sword and charged forward. Yutian Shenming fought. He drew his arrow and ran far away. The others stared blankly at the big and small duo. In such a gloomy situation, such a funny thing could not be avoided. Was this what they meant by finding joy in bitterness? Water-breaking Arrow and the others were aware of the situation in the Priest Academy. They increased their firepower. Originally, they were only shooting from a distance. However, it seemed like they were advancing step by step. All of a sudden, 2 rings of fire appeared high up in the sky. The experts had outstanding awareness and hurriedly dodged to the side. Then heat rose from their feet. It was the 1,000 layers flames of the cinder tree. The spells were cast in 2s, so it was clear that they were from 2 mages. But the 2 mages couldn't be seen in the surroundings. The dozen or so players were all experts, so it was definitely the first time in the history of the game that they couldn't find the player who cast the spells after taking 4 spells. Flaming Jacket did not say anything. Yutian Shenming, who was already an archer but still claimed to be the best magician, looked like he could not take it anymore. The arrows were accurate, the attacks from the magicians were nowhere to be seen, and they were about to engage in close combat. The Han family young master calculated for a while and finally gave the order. Enter the safe zone. Ah. The others were depressed. Enter the safe zone. Although they had said earlier that they would hide in the safe zone if they were harassed by the archers, that was different from the current situation. Now that the enemies were about to ambush them with the 3 magicians, they were forced to escape into the safe zone. This meant that they did not dare to fight the enemies. Although they could keep their levels after entering the safe zone, their previous arrangements would be ruined. They could only let the enemies escape with the 3 magicians. Although they were indignant, they still obeyed the order given that they were facing a formidable enemy. Wandering Sword and the others were the first to enter the Priest Academy. They were followed by Brother Yu, Han family young master, Sword Demon, Unscathed in battle, and Yutian Shenming. The last to enter the safe zone was Encyclopedic Scholar. Both parties passed each other as they entered and exited the safe zone. Their gazes were filled with the smell of gunpowder. However, since they were in the safe zone, gunpowder could not be ignited no matter how much it was. Everyone was indignant as they watched the veterans leave with the 3 magicians. The veterans were elated that the hostage rescue was completed with 0 casualties. Their meticulous arrangements finally paid off. However, it was a pity that the enemies had a clear grasp of the situation. They decided to enter the safe zone without any hesitation. If they were to fight them head-on, the veterans were confident that they could kill all of them since they were fully prepared. What a pity! The 2 groups were filled with unwillingness and regret. Gu Xian, who was dozing off at the front line of the safe zone while carrying a rock, suddenly woke up. He rode his horse like a meteor and charged into the enemy's formation alone. Who's there? The enemy was shocked. They were on high alert, ready to teach the Han family's young master a sneak attack at any time. After all, the enemies had only entered the safe zone and did not surrender. Who would have thought that the enemies did not move? Instead, it was a kid who was sitting by the door with his head down that suddenly exploded. The veterans did not notice this character at all from the beginning, and did not expect him to be in cahoots with these people. When they subconsciously blurted out who he was, they had already seen the face of this person. It was the despicable Grandmaster of Combat who had tormented them both inside and outside the tavern. Good timing. The veterans wanted to settle the score with the ruthless enemies. When they saw this person, they took the initiative to face him. Gu Xian threw a punch at his chest. A circle of people was about to surround him. Who knew that he would cancel his skill, ride his horse like a meteor, and jump with a flying swallow slash, flying over the heads of the people surrounding him. Everyone turned around quickly. There were 3 priests behind them. As expected, the enemy's target was the priests. However, he was too arrogant to charge into the enemy's formation alone. Before Gu Xian's foot landed, the 9 of them had already turned around and formed an angle. When Gu Xian landed, he would fall right into their encirclement. Who knew that when Gu Xian flew into the air, he had already cancelled the flying swallow slash. His body flipped in midair, and at this moment, he was falling headfirst. Everyone was astonished, but they saw him stretch out his hands to support Yi Xiaowu's shoulders in front of him. Yi Xiaowu felt a support on his shoulders. This person was holding onto his shoulders, and was about to flip forward again. A somersault for fun? Yi Xiaowu muttered to himself. Suddenly, an irresistible force lifted him into the air. Shit. Body throw. Yi Xiaowu suddenly reacted. This was the toughness of Kung Fu players. Even if Yi Xiaowu was very familiar with the game and knew all the settings, he could not imagine that someone could perform body throw in such a position without experiencing it himself. Gu Xian continued to do a forward somersault with Yi Xiaowu's shoulders. At the same time, he performed body throw. Yi Xiaowu was thrown into the air. Yi Xiaowu glanced in the air, and knew that he would land in the safe zone. Even so, his attack was outside the safe zone, so he had to take full damage. However, Yi Xiaowu thought about it and felt that this attack was not enough to kill him instantly. It was just throwing him back into the safe zone. What was the meaning of this? Yi Xiaowu was about to shout, "Don't worry about me," when another Grandmaster of Combat charged out from the safe zone. However, within the safe zone, another Grandmaster of Combat charged out, reaching the goal line in 2 or 3 steps. He stepped on the stone that Gu Xian had been sitting on, then stepped on the wall of the door. After 2 steps, he was already in the air. Before Yi Xiaowu could land in the Priest Academy, he had already been caught in mid-air. Immediately after, Yi Xiaowu felt as if he was being lifted high above his head by the opponent, and instantly, tears streamed down his face. Body throw again. This body throw from the 100 Generations strategist was like a 2-handed slam dunk on the basketball court. After lifting Yi Xiaowu in mid-air, he slammed him into the ground. "I'm going to die this time." Yi Xiaowu felt sorrowful. Although he was a priest, he had never enhanced his vitality. More importantly, his level was low. He had already dropped 4 levels in one day. In front of these masters who had advanced class, he was no different from a bean sprout. Yi Xiaowu felt that the game was unfair if he could not die from the fall. Just like that, Yi Xiaowu was thrown into a flash of white light. On the other side, Gu Xian flipped forward again after throwing Yi Xiaowu. The group of veterans hurriedly turned around to surround him. In the end, he did not even land on the ground, and was already in the air. What's going on? The veterans were shocked. Once again, Yi Xiaowu and the others could not save him in time. They felt very guilty. This brother of theirs had died 5 times in one day. Just as they were about to take care of Gu Xian to relieve their guilt, he suddenly disappeared in mid-air. The group of people looked at each other, and shook their heads. "I haven't touched him yet." "Me neither." "Me neither." "Then why is he dead?" Yi Xiaowu, who had been reborn in the Priest Academy, had been paying attention to this side while he was flying. He could see everything clearly and said with a pained expression, "He's not dead. He's just offline." As soon as Yi Xiaowu's voice fell, his vision turned pitch black. He had been surrounded by the Han family young master and the others. Players could not touch each other in the safe zone, but the system had forcibly created a layer of air wall between them. This did not affect the feeling of crowding when there were many people. However, no matter how hard they squeezed, the players would find that there was a subtle gap between them, which the players had always found funny. Therefore, when they were blocked by others like this, although they could not touch each other, they could still squeeze out. However, in the game, due to different professions, there was a great disparity in strength. How could a mere priest like Yi Xiaowu squeeze through the two broad shoulders of Jian Nanyu and unscathed in battle? Even if the two of them were not included, Sword Demon and Blackwater were both skinny, but they had no problem resisting Yi Xiaowu. Moreover, even if they were both priests, they were no match for Yi Xiaowu due to the difference in levels. Yi Xiaowu's feelings could no longer be described with words. What was more depressing was that everyone had surrounded him, but no one was looking at him. Everyone turned to look at his murderer, Encyclopedic Statesman. After Encyclopedic Statesman landed, he flashed back to the Priest Academy. The people outside were still studying Gu Xian, who had disappeared in mid-air. If it was not for the white light that flashed when he disappeared, they would have thought that they had seen teleportation again. Encyclopedic Statesman came over to observe Yi Xiaowu, who had fallen to his death. The way he poked his head to look at Yi Xiaowu in the middle of the crowd was very much like a monkey in a crowded zoo who had managed to squeeze his way to the front of the cage to look at his favorite monkey. Yi Xiaowu met his gaze with a sullen expression, but the others looked at Encyclopedic Statesman with a face full of praise. Not bad. It's really different with Kung Fu. This coordination is beautiful. The crowd praised. You flatter me. It's the Gu brothers who are brave. Encyclopedic Statesman hurriedly said humbly, and kindly pushed the credit to Gu Xian. This coordination, this awareness. How can you two be so telepathic? Kenan Yu felt that the coordination between the two grandmasters of combat was very pleasing to the eye. Encyclopedic Statesman glanced at Kenan Yu and said, "It's enough to communicate with each other beforehand." The crowd was stunned and laughed. Kenan Yu blushed. He thought that Kung Fu practitioners were above the common people, and that everyone's Kung Fu was of the same origin. As soon as they saw each other's moves, they would naturally know to cooperate. He completely forgot that they could secretly send a few messages in the game to make an agreement. When Encyclopedic Statesman found out that Gu Xian was Gu Fei's cousin, and was a member of the Gu family, he eagerly added him as a friend. He did not expect it to come in handy so soon. You guys continue. I'm going offline. Encyclopedic Statesman was almost done. He bade farewell to the crowd, turned around, and waved at Gu Fei on the roof before going offline. The crowd turned around and looked at Yi Xiaowu, who was surrounded by them. They laughed sinisterly, as if a group of gangsters had surrounded a naked girl. Yutian Shenming suddenly possessed Tsubasa Sakuratsuka and suggested loudly, "Take off your pants and flick your dick." Although Yi Xiaowu knew that it was impossible in the game, he could not help but shiver. After calming himself down, he looked at the crowd and said, "What you're doing is hindering the freedom of the players to play the game. You can complain to the GM." Since it was a holographic simulation, there were always unheard of incidents in the game. How many people were there in the game's development team? His imagination couldn't compare to that of thousands of players. Since the start of the game, the players often did unimaginable things. It made the developers, who were chasing after them to patch the game, feel like they were a bunch of people who were cleaning up after the players. In the agreement between the game company and the players, there was a clause that said, "Do not in any way destroy the rights of others to play the game freely." The agreement did not specify what destruction was. Anyway, at the end of the agreement, there was another clause that said, "The game company reserves the right to interpret this agreement." The players were not unfamiliar with this kind of agreement. For example, when installing a program, there would often be such an agreement for the players to click agree. Anyway, no one would read it in detail. As for the destroying the rights of others to play the game freely, until now, it was widely known among the players as a binding incident. Two players got into a conflict for some reason. Later, one of them called his friends to take revenge. Killing the other was not enough, so he captured the other and tied him up like a dumpling in the depths of the forest. The player could not move, and could not go back to the safe zone to log off. If he forcefully logged off and logged back in, he would still be hung up like a dumpling. It meant that he could not play the game anymore. Later, the player called the GM. When the GM found out about the situation, he was shocked and quickly rescued the player. As for the lover of the binding art, he was not punished because it was his first offense. However, because of this, the game made a news announcement, stating that this kind of behavior was absolutely forbidden. If he was discovered again, he would at least be locked in a small black room. In serious cases, he might even have his account deleted. Compared to the system in the game, the players were ultimately a weaker group. No one dared to challenge the system's authority. However, not long after, another binding incident occurred. The system was furious and immediately locked the player who was reported in a small black room. However, after receiving a direct phone call from the player, the system checked and broke out in cold sweat. It turned out that this time, the informant and his friends had tied themselves up and maliciously filed a complaint against the player who had a grudge against them. This time, the system acted carelessly and almost got tricked. The god of the system, who had been tricked by the player, was furious. The informant's account was immediately deleted, and his accomplice was locked up in a small black room. This incident made the developers break out in cold sweat. It also made them realize that the wisdom of the masses was really infinite. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.